morning, Azek. Azek, if we can just test your camera.
Yep.
Open.
Can you hear?
Okay,
But
great.
how come? But the host has stopped my camera.
Okay. Team. If we can just do a quick check of all the panelists' voice and video functions.
Co-host has asked you to start your video. Okay. Can you see?
We can see you, Azek. Wonderful.
Yeah, okay. I don't know because my connection seems iffy nga. Ah,
Oh no.
it's one of those days when the building decided to do some work. So because it's lockdown, so they decided to do all sorts of work. So this is hopefully, Lord.
Hopefully it will hold.
Yeah, hopefully it won't be too noisy. But I hope. Otherwise, pasensya na kayo. We'll actually be in outer space. Spaced out.
Yes, we are beaming. We are beaming live.
Wow. Okay. So hello everybody if you are there.
Yeah, everybody, we are already accepting uh, the audience, and
Okay.
our audience is from all over, including
Great.
from the United States and from our foreign service posts. So yes, we are live now. So everything okay from your end, Asek?
Yes. Okay. As good as can be.
Wonderful. Okay, so Asek will park you muna and we will try
Sure.
other
Okay.
other speakers as well. Thank you, Asek.
Okay. Okay. Thanks.
Dr. Perez, are you here?
Yes, hello.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning. So let me try if my video will work. Okay.
Hi, Dr. Perez, good morning.
Hi, good morning.
Everything good?
Yep. Yeah, I'm also at home, so I apologize in advance if there are some background noise later on.
It's part of the issues, part of the challenges that we have to face, no, when it comes to webcasting at home.
Mm-hmm.
Do what we have to do. So everything good from your end, Dr. Perez?
Yes, all is well. I'm looking forward to our very exciting dialogue discussion this morning.
All right. Okay, so I understand you also have been given a copy of the script just so you'll be able to anticipate when
Mhm.
I will be calling you for your answers later on at
All right.
in the second part of the show. Thank you very much,
Thank
Dr.
you.
So I hope you won't mind. We will park you for a few minutes before
All
we
right.
start. Let's check on Dr. Santiago. Dr. Santiago, are you there?
Santiago or Soriano po?
Soriano, I'm sorry, Dr. Soriano. I'm so sorry. Hey, good morning, Maricar.
Hello, good morning everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Hello.
yes, I can hear you.
Okay po.
We're just testing our setup. You can see me clearly and hear me clearly
Um,
now.
I,
So everything is good from your end.
I think so, except that the background music is rather very high, so I can hear your voice, ma'am. If you were saying something, I can hear it over the music.
Okay. Yes, we can hear you. Definitely can hear you clearly. And
Thank
it's
you
just
po.
that we are looping the
Yeah.
opening PowerPoint presentation. But otherwise, we can see you clearly and we can hear you clearly. So
Okay. Just
great.
like Gay, I apologize in advance if you hear doorbell ringing or dogs barking.
Understood. Understood, Dr. Soriano. Thank you. Thank you for
See you in
joining
a bit.
a bit. And we now go on to Dr. Carol Sobrichea. Dr. Carol, are you here?
Yes, good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Uh,
we can hear you loud and clear, Dr. Carol. Can we
yes,
see?
so I managed to get my PowerPoint presentation on board so I can be the one to click it. Uh,
Oh, okay.
yes, so I'm given 10 minutes, right?
Correct, Dr. Carol.
Okay, I'll stick to my 10 minutes. Thank you.
Dr. Carol, we can't see you though.
I'll have to I opened the video. Oh my gosh. I'll call my daughter again. Okay, I'll just call my daughter.
Understood, Dr. Carol. Okay, so we seem to be, except for that small issue with Dr. Carol's video, we seem to be okay. So, team, go ahead. Thank you, Dr. Carol. So, everything is so we understand, Dr. Carol, that you operate your side. Okay. So everything is good, Dr. Carol. We can see you.
Yes.
Wonderful. Okay.
Okay.
Everything is okay from your end. We will see you at 9 o'clock. See you later, everybody.
It's 9 hours.
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Welcome to this morning's Making Space for Women's webinar in celebration of the 65 years of the United Nations Commission on the Status of Women and of the Philippine National Women's Month. With the team WANA, Laban sa Pandemya, Kaya. This program is organized by the following organizations: the Department of Foreign Affairs, the Department of Science and Technology, the Commission on Higher Education, the Foreign Service Institute, and the Philippine Space Agency. As few reminders, we have prepared for you Viber stickers where you can scan. And we would like to remind everyone that this one will be recorded and you can participate by submitting your questions via chat box. And to moderate our morning session, let us all welcome on our virtual floor the director from the Office of United Nations, Director Emma R. Sarne.
Thank you, Kit, and good morning to everyone joining us in this webinar, Making Space for Women, Advancing Gender Equality in the Philippine Space Sector. We are webcasting live from our homes as in an effort to contain the spread of the COVID-19 virus, more stringent restrictions are now in place in what is known as the NCR Plus bubble, which includes Metro Manila, Bulacan, Laguna, Cavite, and Rizal. These are precarious times, ladies and gentlemen, and in addition to wishing you, your families, and loved ones good health, I hope that you are in a safe space, away from possible exposure, and especially for all the students and the young women and girls who are joining us this morning, I hope that you are ready for an exciting learning adventure through space. In celebration, although belatedly, of the International Day of Women and Girls in Science on 11 February, the International Women's Month this March, and as part of the recently concluded 65th session of the UN Commission on the Status of Women, this webinar aims to contribute to the promotion of full and equal access of women and girls in science, particularly in the space science sector. We will present the current gender situation and the factors that may have contributed to gender inequality in this field. And we will also explore the policies and programs that will enhance women and girls' participation in the space science sector and STEM in general, and hopefully close the gender gap in that field. We will also be learning about two exciting space programs, the Space for Women program of the UN Office for Outer Space Affairs and the Stamina for Space program funded by the Department of Science and Technology. We will be hearing from scientists, engineers, and policymakers, and also from all of you, our audience. We therefore encourage your active participation by sending in or typing in your questions on the chat box if you are joining us on Zoom, or in the comments section if you are watching us on YouTube. We have a dedicated team of chat moderators who are manning these platforms ready to take your questions. There will be challenges, time being the first one, so we may not be able to ask all of your questions, but we will endeavor to do so within our allotted time. Now I know I keep saying we, and yet you only see me. As such, may I ask the organizers to kindly switch on their video cameras to be recognized. Ladies and gentlemen, this webinar would not have been possible without the vision of the Assistant Secretary of the DFA's Office for the United Nations and International Organizations, ASEC Noraline Jubaira Baha, and the support of the Department of Science and Technology, the Philippine Space Agency, the Commission on Higher Education, the Foreign Service Institute, and also the permanent mission of the Philippines to the UN office in Vienna. And at this early stage, I would like to acknowledge and thank our speakers for lending us their valuable time and knowledge. And these are Dr. Maricor Soriano, Dr. Caroline Sobrichea, Dr. Gay Jane Perez, Engineer Josephine Santiago Bond, Dr. Marichu Liwanag, and Mr. Marcus Woltran. And of course, our dedicated tech and policy team from the DFA, Director Joylene Santos, Ms. Mai E. Fabros, Mr. Christopher Castillo, Ms. Michelle Hayag, Ms. Regina De La Fuente, Mr. Mark Espeleta, and from the Philippine Mission to the United Nations Office in Vienna, Vice Consul Andrea Lazaro. And from the DOST and the Philippine Space Agency and Stamina for Space Program, we thank Ms. Karen Mabagos, Ms. Sam Medrano, Ms. Sofia Navarro, Ms. Erica Picar, and Ms. Angelica Pizarro, and Mr. Ronald Sonza. To formally open our webinar, I would like to invite the Assistant Secretary of the Office of the United Nations and International Organizations of the Department of Foreign Affairs, Ms. Noraline Baha, for her welcome address. Asik Baha, you have the floor.
Thank you, Emma. I hope you can all hear me. Our esteemed speakers, colleagues in the DFA, fellow public servants, members of the academe, students from the Philippine high schools and colleges, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning, good evening, good night, wherever you are. Welcome to today's webinar, Making Space for Women, Advancing Gender Equality in the Space Science Sector, in the Philippine Space Science Sector, I should say. A contribution of the DFA's Office of United Nations and International Organizations to the worldwide celebration of Women's Month. We are joined in this endeavor by our partners, who Emma has mentioned already, but I will repeat: the Foreign Service Institute, the Permanent Mission of the Philippines to the UN in Vienna, the UNOSA, DOST, PhilSA, and CHED. The theme for the 2021 National Women's Month celebration, Juana sa panahon ng pandemya, Kaya, with particular reference to the resilience of women, takes on even more relevance in these uncertain times. The pandemic has been especially hard on women. As UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres, in his opening remarks at the 65th session of the Commission on the Status of Women, said, and I quote, "This crisis has a woman's face. The COVID-19 pandemic is further exacerbating entrenched inequalities and discrimination against women and girls, erasing years of progress towards gender equality." While the Philippines has long championed the expansion of spaces for women in critical decision-making positions, the journey hasn't been easy. Although research has long debunked gender differences in mental ability, it has affirmed the strong impact of stereotypes and structural biases on children, especially girls. This translates to the long recognized global gap in the number of women who pursue careers in STEM. The lack of representation, combined with low investment in higher education, science, technology, and innovation, further deters women and girls from the pursuit of science-related fields. The past few months have been exciting times for science, from recent triumphs in finding a cure for the SARS-CoV-2 virus to the latest gadgets brought about by the Perseverance rover to the planet Mars. Science has been pushing the boundaries of discovery. But you may ask, why this webinar? Why discuss women in the space sciences in the time of COVID? Given the overwhelmingly earthly concerns in the unfolding pandemic, how relevant can discussing women in space science be? Well, space science has provided innovative solutions which has lent much support to pandemic response and recovery. These solutions, which have enabled the efficient delivery of essential goods across borders and contact tracing, were provided by three key space technologies: Earth observation, global navigation satellite systems, and satellite communications. Groundbreaking space application solutions have also produced new open source technologies now available in the market, such as handheld ventilators, 3D printed respirator masks, and sterilization kits. In the Philippines, the Space Data Dashboard homepage produces maps and other data for monitoring ground activities related to COVID-19. Staying safe and connected has thus become possible thanks to space technologies, enabling families and friends to nurture relationships virtually, allowing developing countries to access healthcare through e-health platforms, and providing children the opportunity to continue their education. The field of space science is rapidly expanding and providing countless opportunities for technological, economic, and even personal advancement. For women to benefit from space science, it is necessary that they are part of its research and development. Given this and the breadth of innovation and possible solutions that the space science sector can offer, the recognition and participation of women in this field becomes imperative. Imperative because we need to ensure that these technologies are responsive to the needs of women. Imperative because women's voices and ideas need to be put into action in holding up half the sky. And imperative because gender equality and equal opportunity are necessary for sustainable economic growth. Ladies and gentlemen, today's webinar will share the stories, the triumphs, the struggles of four Filipinas who have blazed the trail in space science. It will highlight the policy and program leaps made by the Philippines to close the gender gap in STEM to secure sustainable and inclusive development in line with Ambition Natin 2040. We will also learn about two exciting new programs launched by UNOSA and PhilSA, encouraging the participation and involvement of women and girls in space activities. For the Philippines, the future in space science looks bright. And just as the pandemic has a woman's face, the future of space science also has a woman's face. Currently, about 70% of the personnel in PhilSA are women. And I was actually quite surprised and happy to hear this. We will hear the stories of these Filipinas who have shattered the glass ceiling in the space science sector. Remember that we chip away the ceiling when every woman claims her space. To our dear young participants, the opportunities before you are vast and limitless. May today's discussion light your path beyond the moon and stars. Keep safe and fiercely protect your space. Thank you and have a good day.
Thank you very much, Assistant Secretary Baha, for those inspiring remarks. It is indeed very inspiring to know that the future of space science is bright. And not only is it bright, but it has a woman's face, amply represented in the PhilSA's 70% women staff complement. Thank you. We move on to the first part of our webinar, where we will hear about the policies and programs in the space science sector, specifically aimed at encouraging women and girls' involvement. First off, the United Nations Office for Outer Space Affairs, or UNOSA, has launched the Space for Women project that facilitates access to the benefits of space exploration, STEM education, and STEM careers for women and girls around the world. We will hear from Mr. Marcus Woltron, who is a program officer in the Office of the Director of the UNOSA. Marcus is in charge of the office's engagement in the implementation of the Space for Women project. And not only will he be discussing current activities of the project, but will also present its overall multi-year program plan and the benefits of partnering with UNOSA on this endeavor. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Marcus Woltron and his presentation on Space for Women, Advancing Gender Equality in Jobs and Education in the Space Sector. Unmute, please.
But what does UNOSA do? What is our role?
Assist dito. Hindi nag-play yung simula.
But what does UNOSA do? What is our role? So the United Nations Office for Outer Space Affairs undertakes initiatives that promote international cooperation in the peaceful uses of outer space in general to achieve them. And Space for Women is one initiative of UNOSA that facilitates access to the benefits of space exploration, science and technology, STEM education, STEM careers for women and girls all around the world. So with this initiative, we are on the one hand side working directly towards implementation of gender equality, SDG number 5, but we also empower quality education, SDG number 4. So, and I would like to give you in the next couple of minutes a bit of an overview of why we are doing what we are doing under Space for Women and what are we doing under Space for Women. So it is obvious that women and girls remain underrepresented in STEM every career stage. Gender disparity widens at the secondary and tertiary school levels in many countries. Girls score as well as, or even better than their male peers on science and math related tests, but it is less likely to pursue those fields later in their education. When you go one step forward, women represent only 35% of all students enrolled in STEM related higher education. And then when you look into the academic career path, it declines from assistant professor to associate professor to the full professorship when you look at the numbers of how many women are working in these areas. And gender equality in the space sector. Over 560 people have traveled to space and only 11% of them have been women. When you look at 15 female astronauts have conducted spacewalks compared to 210 men. After 220 spacewalks and over 20 years of progress at the ISS, two female astronauts finally took part in a singular extravehicular activity last year. When you look at the private sector, women represent only around 20% of the leaders in aerospace and defense. And women represent only around 20 to 22% of the space industry workforce, which is on par with statistics 30 years ago. And that's something which is really important to underline. These statistics have only minimum changed over the past years. And why is it importance of gender equality in space? What is the background of us doing Space for Women? So we're not addressing only one SDG. I always say that the Space for Women program is based on a societal need, not on gender empowerment only in the space sector. So when you look at other SDGs, there's a certain improvement also in these SDGs. For example, under SDG 1, space tends to offer high earning jobs in a fast growing sector, providing women with more financial freedom. Looking at SDG 8, that's something which is really important. 90% of future jobs will require STEM related skills. So women must possess skills and education to be competitive in the future employment market. And then when you look at SDG 9, studies in both the private sector and the public sector have always shown that diversity is an asset. Diversity of skills and perspective leads to greater innovation and success. But why do women and girls not enter or leave STEM fields? How can we change that? There is a bias in the hiring process, with male candidates selected more often. Portraying STEM as a male dominant field undermines the confidence, interest, and willingness to pursue a career in STEM field. Lack of female role models, lack of encouragement from peers and teachers. Girls also have a limited exposure to the creativity and contribution that STEM fields make for a better world. So what does it mean under the roof of the United Nations? So when we go back to 1999 to the Unispace 3 conference, we had in the Unispace 3 conference for the first time the mentioning of the importance of gender equality in the space sector. Then we advanced to the Millennium Development Goals. We have released the Sustainable Development Goals, which with specific SDG on gender equality. And in this SDG, we also have a target which focuses on increasing accessibility to technology and innovation for women. And for us from UNUSA, in preparing for 2018 for the so-called Unispace Plus 50 conference, the member states have identified several different thematic priorities, and one of those thematic priorities was capacity building in the 21st century. And there was a specific request from developing countries to use space as a vehicle to increase gender parity in STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics related topics. And this led to the first Space Forum expert meeting in New York, which was held in cooperation by UNUSA and UN Women. And then we have advanced gradually from 2017 to 2020 until finally releasing the Space for Women website. So how does Space for Women increase access to STEM and space education? It promotes a mentoring platform and a network. It provides policy relevant advice, research and data, knowledge management, and very important, evidence-based awareness raising. It facilitates capacity building and training. It communicates the opportunities in STEM education. It empowers young women and girls to contribute and be a part of the space solutions in the future. So last year, on the 11th of February, 2020, we launched the Space for Women website, and the first ever cohort of network mentors began their activities in spring. So the objectives are educate for women and girls in STEM, industry leader support, and establish regional mentorship networks. So currently, as we speak, we have an open call for more mentors to join our mentor group. So please feel free to check the UN Space Woman website, where you can find more information about. The main background of the mentors is that we have a diversity not only of the fields which they represent as workforce in the space sector, we have a global representation, and we are hoping to have also some men who are willing to mentor other young women to break the glass ceiling and advance in a career in the space sector. So the status as we see today, Space Woman, it has been designed as a multi-year program plan. It is established as a global initiative for increasing access to education and jobs for women and girls in the space sector. We have an active engagement of over 100 mentors and mentees worldwide. And as I said, we have diverse and impactful projects. So it's not only the mentoring part which is important, it's also that we bring together the different global initiatives. We are thankful for support from the Permanent Mission of Israel, the European Space Agency, the government of Austria, and the Women in Aerospace in Europe. So what does it mean? What are the key benefits in the partnership under Space for Women? So it's driving forward the campaign for gender equality and empowerment. It demonstrates the effectiveness of collaboration and collaborative action by unifying activities. There are measurable results to narrow gaps. It's reference-able gender promotional work, and it's a high visibility under our Space for Women initiative. So what's the next steps? What do we want to do? So on the one hand side, we are promoting events and activities. So we are going to host, hopefully this year, depending on the global health situation, we are hosting a workshop in Brazil. We are hosting Space Woman 2022 meeting, hopefully in the Asia region. We are expanding the mentoring platform. And what we have done with the call for the new mentors, we have separated on the one hand side the mentor program. So we are calling for mentors, and we are going to launch soon a networking program. So if you are working in a gender empowerment field and with a specific connection to technology and innovation, or with science, technology, engineering, mathematics, you will be able to apply to become a network member, and we will be facilitating exchanges. We will be having subgroups to advance jointly in this area. And obviously, and that's why I'm really grateful to be invited today to join you at this event. We have ongoing outreach and awareness raising. We hope to be able to have activities under this year's so-called World Space Week, which is happening at the beginning of October, where we are where we heard that the topic is going to be on space for women and gender empowerment in the space sector. So we're going to have dedicated events in there. We're going to have events at the sidelines of Expo. We are planning something again for next year on the 11th of February 2022. So everything which is underlying the need and increasing the awareness around our activities, that's something of a priority in the next steps. So in summary, I would like to really thank the organizers again for having us, for inviting us to join this event. Please feel free to check out the spaceforwomen.unusa.org website. Feel free to reach out to me personally if I have any questions, if you want to become a mentor. We are going to open the mentee side as well. So we are closing the application for the becoming a mentor by the end of March, and we're going to open the opportunity for mentees application by the beginning of April. And what does this mean? So there will be a one-on-one engagement with the mentors, and there will be a support from the mentor to the mentees in the future. More information, feel free to either follow us on Space for Women UNUSA on Twitter, check out our Facebook page, or more information on our website. Thank you very much again for giving me the opportunity to share with you the background on Space for Women. And please feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions. I wish you and the organizers a successful event today. And I'm looking forward to hear the results and outcomes of your discussions. Thank you very much and goodbye.
Thank you very much, Mr. Walton. It is clear from his presentation that gender disparity is present in STEM, and encouraging women and girls' participation in this field is important not only in the pursuit of overall equality, of course, and empowerment of women and girls, but it also contributes to the attainment of the Sustainable Development Goals. And we are glad to note that there are a number of Space for Women events happening this year. And though that is a pre recorded presentation because it is quite an unholy hour in the early morning in Vienna, Marcus has gladly given permission for his presentation to be made available to our audience on demand. And so we will be sending the recording to you along with your e-certificates, but you will have to accomplish the evaluation form for you to receive your e-certificate. And if you have questions about the project and specifically how to apply as a mentor, though I understand that the applications will end this March, or as a mentee, which will be launched soon after, please visit the UNOSA's Space for Women site, and you can also send questions to Mr. Walton. And you may send these in the chat box if you are in the Zoom platform, or in the comments section if you are watching on YouTube. Please kindly indicate that the question or the comment is for Mr. Marcus Walton. Our next speaker is Dr. Maricor Soriano, a professor of physics and the Deputy Director for Academic Affairs at the National Institute of Physics of the University of the Philippines. She specializes in video and image processing applied to multidisciplinary domains such as art analysis, coral reef conservation, sports and biometrics, and public health. She is currently the program leader of the Stamina for Space program and leads a project on developing space cameras. Her presentation, Juana's Place is in Stamina for Space, will highlight the various research and capacity building activities of the Philippine Microsat program, providing various opportunities for multi-sectoral participation on satellite development and operation in the Philippines, as well as to develop deep expertise that will sustain the growth of a local scientific industrial base in space technology and applications, and hopefully a lot of space where women scientists can develop. Dr. Soriano, you have the floor.
Thank you. May I share my screen? Yeah, there we go. Good morning, everyone. So I will talk about two things, or from my title, Juana's Place is in Stamina for Space, I'll talk about the Stamina for Space program, and I'll talk about the women of Stamina for Space. Let me start first by walking you through the timeline of Philippine space technology development. Here we see that 8 years ago, the baseline research on space activities and infrastructure began with talks with Japan and UK. In 2014, just in a year, we were able to develop Diwata 1, the first microsatellite of the Philippines under the Philippine Microsatellite Program. In 2015, a National Space Development Program was published and was lobbied to Congress. In 2016, Diwata 1 was deployed from the International Space Station. In the same year, a Philippine ground receiving station was established, and we were able to pick up signals from Diwata 1 and other satellites and even control Diwata 1. From 2016 to 2018, development of Diwata 2 commenced. And in October 29, 2018, the Diwata 2 was launched to the ISS via rocket H2A. In the same year, the first CubeSat, Maya 1, was deployed to space. Okay, this was developed by Philippine scholars in Japan. And since the publishing of the National Space Development Program 4 years since, the Philippine Space Agency was established in August 8, 2019. From 2018, actually, up to 2022, the successor to the Philippine Microsatellite Program, the Stamina for Space, commenced. It went on. It is going on up to 2022. In 2021, we're starting development for an advanced satellite platform with multispectral imager. By the way, if you were following the news after the Mars rover, in March 14, just 2 days after probe to Mars was landed in Mars, in that February month, 2021, Maya 2 was sent to space, and in just last March 14, it was deployed from ISS. So today I'll talk about this second program, Stamina for Space. Now, Stamina for Space. Stamina stands for Space Technology and Applications, Mastery, Innovation, and Advancement for Space. It has 4 goals, and briefly, these goals are to get data from Earth observing satellites and to make actionable information, or rather get information from this data and make actionable information out of them. To build an industrial base, meaning to have a sort of space industry with local partners, local industrial partners. The program also aims to set up an environment for research and development. And lastly, to develop highly skilled people who are T-shaped. When we say T-shaped, the vertical bar of the T means that they have a deep understanding and deep expertise, but the horizontal bar means they can collaborate with different experts. Okay, so all of these are being done through satellite development. Okay? So the satellite development is a platform to get all these program objectives done. The Stamina for Space program has 5 projects. And briefly, they are optical. This project builds the space cameras, PHL-50. This project builds the satellite bus. Step Up trains the scholars, and they are the ones that are building the CubeSats. And this is a partnership among several universities in the Philippines. GRASP operates the satellites and analyzes the data coming from the satellites. And the ASP, or the Advanced Science Program, is a program that builds a 100 kilogram satellite and is actually a transition to the Philippine Space Agency. Now, when you talk about satellite technology, there are actually two technologies there. There's the upstream technologies, which are the satellite and the payloads, and there are downstream technologies, which are the ground receiving station, which controls and gets data from the satellite, and of course, remote sensing, meaning the data from the satellite is further analyzed to get actionable information. Okay. So let's talk about the upstream technologies. So these are some of the assets that satellite assets that the Philippine already has or currently developing. So if you recall, we had Diwata 1 and Maya 1. They've already been they have already finished their mission. Diwata 2 is still in orbit. This is not our satellite, but we are licensed to get information from a Novasar satellite. So Maya 2 was just recently deployed from ISS. Right now, we are developing TrueColor, which is a 100 kilogram multispectral satellite, multispectral telescope satellite as a payload. And then in the future, there are several Maya 3, 4, and even 5 CubeSats, and also two Iris CubeSats that will be developed together with Taiwan. Now, briefly, the Wata 1 is a 50 kilogram microsatellite, and its altitude is 420 kilometers. It was launched last 2016, and in 2019 it ended its mission. It had several optical payloads like a camera, wide field camera, middle field camera, spaceborne multispectral imager, and high precision telescope. The first Maya CubeSat was released in August 10, 2018, together with CubeSats from Bhutan and Malaysia. So our Filipino engineers were trained to build CubeSats, and we're continuing to build CubeSats and learn from the experience. This is a technology demonstration satellite. Our second 50 kilogram class satellite is Diwata 2, and it was launched into orbit in October 29. And its altitude is higher, 620 kilometers, and it's expected to have a lifespan of more than 5 years, possibly 10 years. Now, what's new with the Diwata 2? Several things done locally, or rather developed locally, are part of the payload of Diwata 2. For example, it has an amateur ham radio, an experimental altitude determination module, sun aspect sensor, enhanced resolution camera, a deployable solar panel, and of course its orbit is sun synchronous, meaning it has more revisit times across the Philippines. Then our Maya 2, and this is a screenshot at the moment it was launched from ISS. This CubeSat is once again a technology demonstration. It's testing out new solar cells and latch-up detection chip. We are also building 2 cameras for remote sensing locally. So there's HiPi, which can be borne by a drone, and then Malikmata, which is for a Diwata 3, another 50 kilogram future satellite. Okay. So the spaceborne payload, Malikmata 1, stands for multi-application line imaging camera monochrome and trilinear array. And you see here the exploded view, the design, and of course it's a line array. So these two payloads are actually not your typical cameras because they don't take an image as a snapshot. They take an image by scanning the scene, so they can only see one line of the scene at a time, and they build it up, much like how a scanner builds up an image. Now let's talk about downstream technologies. When you say downstream technologies, you have the ground receiving station. So we have an antenna at the Advanced Science Technology Institute. It can sense the satellites and then send signals or commands to satellites and requests for data. So it can upload commands and download data from passing satellites. Not only Diwata and Maya, but also other international satellites. So the other aspect of downstream technologies are, of course, the data themselves. And these are examples of data that have been obtained and processed from Diwata 1. Diwata 1 has a spectral camera, meaning it has several channels or bands. And you can see here the wavelength of light that it captures as it passes across the zone. The Diwata 2 has a high precision telescope, and these are interesting pictures because these were taken before and after the lockdown last year. So here is Metro Manila on January 6, 2020, and this is in Mactan Cebu Airport, March 19. So as you can see, there's not much activity because there are hardly any planes on the runway. Meaning, remember in the first lockdown, transportation, including air transportation, was limited. Here as well is a remote sense image of Metro Manila. Okay. I believe this is somewhere in San Juan. We can also use satellite imagery for monitoring urban changes. So we can see here a new infrastructure with a baseline of old satellite data overlaid with new satellite data, and we can process these overlays and find out which are new, which have changed, and which are some spots which have been unchanged. So this is good for checking, for example, if, for example, an LGU builds a road, we can see if the road indeed was built, or if there is an urban sprawl or increasing number of houses that are being built in different locations. Last year, if you recall, there was a forest fire in Benguet in February before the pandemic. And so here are actual images taken by Diwata 2 showing the extent of the burnt area, as well as here. Recall also that Taal volcano erupted early in the year. Malas talaga yung 2020, no? Ang daming kamalasan. So here in this image, it shows the ashfall extent now. Also taken from our Diwata satellite. You recall also that after the lockdown, Manila Bay suddenly looked clean. Actually, it's not because it acquired a turquoise blue tinge, but it was not because it became clean because of the lockdown, but actually our company started releasing some chemicals. But here you can see that the Diwata 2 imagery and Diwata 1, Diwata 2 imagery can show the turbidity of Manila Bay, okay? And also Laguna de Bay. Now, let me now talk about the second part of my presentation about women in stamina for space. So what are the skills needed to build a satellite or to operate a satellite or analyze the image? Of course, you need to have expertise in electronics engineering, computer engineering, in communications engineering, physics, remote sensing, systems engineering, mechanical engineering. Okay. You also have to have good communication and leadership skills. In addition, you must be able to collaborate. You're willing to learn and you're also willing to mentor. Please note that when you make a satellite, and when it's already launched in space, you cannot just bring it back and fix it if there's something wrong. Everything must be working well before it gets launched. So a lot of simulation and computer-aided engineering and testing and prototyping are being done on the ground even before the satellite is launched. So it has to work perfectly before it's being launched. It gets launched. Now, the Stamina for Space program in general is 1/3
female, roughly one third female. Okay, so as you can see here, the staffing pie chart looks like this. So where are the women? And remember, there are five projects I mentioned earlier. There are five projects in Stamina for Space. And for example, optical, there are 12 staff and four of them are women, and so on. 7 out of 22 staff, 7 out of 18 staff, 5 out of 30 staff, etc. And you also have two batches of scholars. Okay, so in terms of the scholars, they're nearly parity. So there's a total of 35 women out of 112 members. Yeah. So what are the roles of these ladies? So here we list down the names of these ladies and their roles in the program. So I'm the program leader and the project leader of Optical, and I have three lady researchers with me. And in others, you can see here their positions: science research specialist, information officer, project manager, project assistant, embedded systems developer, etc. Okay, scholar, senior SRS, etc. Okay, so if we just limit it to the staff of the Stamina for Space program, it's still one third, 28, 68. If we include the scholars are, as I said, almost equal. 7 out of 16 are ladies. These are the step-up scholars. They are the ones being trained to develop the CubeSats. It's nearly equal. Also, last year we called for applications to the Stamina for Space program because there were a lot of opening because the Philippine Space Agency uh, absorbed several of our staff, so we had a call for applicants. And out of the 565 applicants, 227 female women, applied. 122 applied in the technical positions and 105 administrative positions. That means 4 out of 10 applicants were women in the Stamina for Space program. Not bad, right? And so I leave you with some collage of what we women do in Stamina for Space. So yeah, we do calibration and validation. We do some communication work, meaning technical communication. Like these are antennas, and they're using the built-in radio of the amateur radio of the satellites we launch. We assemble the satellites here, the leaders here. Okay? They operate the satellites and the radio, and they assemble the CubeSats. We also do a lot of outreach. So here we go out and mentor, share our through talks and through presentations. We share our work. Okay, and we welcome visitors to the lab. I hope we can welcome you to the lab when everything opens up again. So that's the story of Stamina for Space and how women are in Stamina for Space. And if you have any questions, feel free to follow us on Facebook, hit us up at Twitter and Instagram, and email me or the Stamina for Space staff for more information. In closing, I'd like to thank our partners and our funding agency. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Soriano. It is indeed interesting to learn about how the Stamina for Space program cultivates the deep interest, meaningful and long-term engagement in the Philippine satellite program. And this is the type of space that is needed by women and girls, an opportunity to develop a career. It's not just a hobby, but a career. It's an opportunity to develop a career in space science, and we have seen the various fields, in both upstream and downstream technology development that budding scientists can engage in. And this, of course, highlighted the importance of having a holistic view in the field of space science, that it's not just engaging in astronomy or the study of space, but it has also a lot of downstream technology and applications that is relevant to our daily lives. Now, given the international and local programs available for women's involvement, Let us listen now to how the Philippine educational system is supporting and enabling women's meaningful participation in the STEM sector. Our speaker, Dr. Carolyn Sobrichea, is the chair of the Commission on Higher Education's Technical Panel on Gender and Women's Studies. She is a member of the Advisory Council of TESDA's Women's Center and the Vice President of the UP Center for Women's Studies Foundation. Her long service at the UP Center for Women's Studies was marked by the establishment of gender offices in all the constituent campuses of UP. Her publications and insights have also led to the mainstreaming of gender topics and courses across the various curricular programs of the University of the Philippines and other tertiary schools across the Philippines and Asia. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Dr. Carolyn Sobrichea.
Good morning to all of us. Will you kindly just allow me to share my screen for a moment, please? Can you see my presentation?
Yes, we can, Dr. Carol.
Okay. So let me start. I will, many of what I'm going to mention here was already mentioned by, just a moment, Katrina. No, wala. How do I switch to the other screen? Okay. 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 So uh, let me just provide a context around which the discussion and the engagement of the educational system has gone through. We did a study before we established the uh, women's technical panel of the Commission on Higher Education to look at all the gender dimensions, so the challenges and opportunities for both sexes in the field of education. And just 2 years ago, we did a survey, and much of the what I'm sharing with you comes from the survey we did in 2019 with the Philippine Business Coalition for women's empowerment to identify what are the barriers for women to enter into the science, technology, and math disciplines. As mentioned by our previous speakers, there is an increasing enrollment of women in STEM courses in decreasing in higher education. This is very sad. In 2016, 2017 alone, only 43% of females in STEM courses, and this was lower than the previous year. So there are very recent challenges for women to enter in STEM: science, technology, education, and math. Women in STEM are mostly in non-engineering and IT fields. There are female-dominated science and technology disciplines, the nursing, the medical profession, and IT fields, but the engineering field is really heavily male-dominated. 52% of STEM researchers are females. So what happens is that while very few get into the engineering discipline, once they get into the field of occupation, at least half of them, or more than half of the researchers, are being employed, no, by the different industries. This was mentioned earlier also, and I would like to reiterate it, that women leave the science, engineering, and technology. We have different categories so may set kami, no? One, of course, is isolation, no, when they are already in the industry, in the field, no, and it's male dominated. They don't feel comfortable. But I would like to say that the Philippine government, with the help of the Philippine Commission on Women and other institutional or government agencies, have tried to do this. For instance, in the male-dominated military profession, we managed to get the dormitories, the comfort room, and other facilities more women-friendly, uh, and, and of course, to enable more women to enter in male-dominated industries. There is a hostile male-dominated work environment. This has been mentioned a while ago. And then ineffective executive feedback and lack of models or lack of effective sponsors. This is one of the reasons given for the relatively lower participation of females in the set in the courses. Other causes of low female participation in sciences, engineering, and technology related courses has to do with gender discrimination in various areas of academic engagements. Classroom learning is so misogynist, no? The research and extension services. We have tried to do this. We have tried to address this problem now with CHED, no? Especially pagka may extension service, they have to go on field work in order to comply with their academic requirements. Of course, the never-ending problem of sexual harassment in both in male-dominated schools and male-dominated industries once they graduate. So there's very little encouragement for them to continue pursuing STEM-related courses. And then, of course, as mentioned a while ago, the lack of female models for aspiring girls and female adolescents. Allow me to mention too that one of the innovations done in the Philippines, of course, when we moved from the 10 years high school uh, uh, to 12 years to be at par with all other academic institutions across the world. So we had 11 and 12, and one of the pioneering and innovative work that was done was to put a lot of science and technology courses in 11 and 12, so that when high school students get into college, are ready and prepared, especially girls, no, to enter into the engineering and technology courses. Um, on the side of, while these are the gaps and the challenges, we can see now that there are many opportunities for women graduates of SED related courses. There is a big demand now, rise in employment opportunities from 9.7 million jobs only in 1970, this was decades ago, to 17 million in 2017. So I think if we market this and we show all of these opportunities, we can encourage more girls to go into to space science, no? So I'm really interested in space science, but what I'm trying to say is we'll see whether the college courses are enabling enough for women to go into the space science industries. 79% growth in employment in STEM, so this is very high, compared to only 34 growth in all fields. So compared to technology courses, employment opportunities, there are more now industries, schools, universities, private sectors, the companies that are willing to employ science and technology graduates. In 2016, occupational wages survey showed that 8 out of 10 highest earning professionals are STEM, are in the STEM field. So yung mga highest paid ngayon, they come from courses or studies that are science and technology related. Okay, what have we done in CHED to ensure that all the gender issues and biases against females are dealt with, no? One of the initiatives that we did in 2015 was to establish the policies and guidelines on gender and development in accordance with the laws of the country. There are 14 or 15 laws now that we have to look into, and with the guidance, of course, of the Philippine Commission on Women. Over and above that, of course, our CMO, we call this the CMO 1, is informed by all the international commitments, the commission, the CEDAW of 1981, the Beijing Platform for Action, as was mentioned a while ago. And of course, we're informed by the provisions of the Philippine Constitution, Article 2, Section 14, and then the Women and Development Act, RA 7192. And of course, the most important legal document would be the Magna Carta of Women, which was passed in 1909. So the guidelines that we established in 2015 are informed by all of these international commitments as well as national laws. The GAD focal point system to ensure that GAD mainstreaming and the implementation of gender-related policies and programs are carried out. The Commission on Higher Education established the GAD focal point system, no, which is chaired no less by the head of the Commission on Higher Education, and under the office of the commissioner, we have the GAD focal point committee, and we have the pool of directors that try to ensure that the guidelines are followed, and of course, uh, staff that try to support them. We have across the different CHED regions, there are GAD focal units as mandated by the Philippine Commission on Women. So the composition of the focal point system has to change every 3 years. This is both an opportunity and a challenge because we realize that every time you change the officers and the staff, we have to do everything all over again. Their responsibilities are to review the policies, standards, and guidelines, no, and then to conduct capacity building on gender and development. And it is very important that we always state that the members of this committee should not expect any honorarium. And this is done on a voluntary basis just to encourage the private schools, because government does not have problems when it comes to GAD money and GAD funding. But there are many challenges with private schools, especially now with the lockdown, and enrollment has really gone down. So for faculty members to sit in this body, they have to commit not to expect any honoraria. One of the major functions, of course, of the GAD committee is to curriculum development, policy coverage, and to ensure that all the gender biases, all the curricular, in the language of the curriculum are done away with. So this prevents all forms of gender-based discrimination in curriculum, research, and extension productions. The Philippine Commission on Women and all the 15 laws we have in the Philippines provide the template around which we review the curricular programs. And then each institution, schools all across the country, higher educational institutions must include mainstreaming strategies in their institutional development plans. We have a partner academic institutions, uh, the academic organizations of all the different disciplines. So we have the Association of Engineers, for instance, psychologists like that, which help us try to look into institutional capacity initiatives. So there has to be continuing training for them to understand and work towards attaining the goals of their programs. What is very important, and we have tried to monitor all schools, is the development of a library and learning materials. I think to be at par with academic institutions all over the world, no? And my model, of course, is UP because I come from UP. And I've been requested to sit here primarily so that I can bring in the lessons and the good practices of UP, is to ensure that adequate and accessible library and related learning materials across disciplines are available. They should be ready, but of course they should be non-sexist. So we have a committee that tries to review this, and of course affirmative also for 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 girls to enter the science and technology disciplines, and develop learning materials using gender fair language. We already have the guidelines for this, and we just make sure that these guidelines are implemented. So what we try to encourage in CHED, the holding, like now it's Women's Month, no? So we try to uh, encourage all the academic institutions, higher learning universities, to carry out their GAD activities, GAD programs, and engage the disciplines, the different disciplines in their universities, because sometimes it's limited to just one college like that. And we really encourage them to get into the science and technology and mathematics disciplines, so that we can really influence the science and technologies areas. Access to new information and analytical tools related to their programs. And of course, they have to have budgets for gender and development programs. As I said, we have less problem with state colleges and universities because they have got funding. We are having problems, of course, with private schools because this has to be an added financial burden on them. But I'm very proud of some private schools like Miriam College. We have model private schools already, including the private schools in Mindanao that have shown fantastic achievements when it comes to encouraging their girls to go into science and technology courses. Policy articulation to mainstream gender equality and women's empowerment into academic programs and course offerings. And the GAD committee must identify standards for the development, implementation, and monitoring of all uh, the activities of their schools and universities. This is what I chair. I chair the technical panel, and my duties is to review the duty of my committee. I have fantastic members in this committee. They come from both from private and government academic institutions. So we are tasked to review proposed course offerings, research proposals, extension projects, um, to make it to check no whether they are gender responsive, to provide technical assistance. So we provide technical assistance for all the schools in all areas of work. And then development of discipline specific manuals and guidelines. So we have managed to come up with several guidelines, but of course in collaboration with the different disciplines. So we are really would like in the future to work more closely, with the science and technology disciplines. um, so this is the technical panel. So this is my last slide. As I said, while we seem to have done a lot already in the Philippines, we are considered as one of the models in the ASEAN region when it comes to gender mainstreaming. But if you look at the outcomes, they are not there. So we have to really, especially now in the context of COVID-19, we're being tasked to prepare for the new normal now and perhaps revisit all of our guidelines. So my recommendation is that to really encourage more gender sensitive company policies and programs. Women will not go into science or space related employment if the employment opportunity is not fit for them. So we encourage companies, private institutions, factories, for instance, to institutionalize the provision of gender sensitivity trainings for their new hires, for regular employees, and to all the officers and members and board of directors. In a survey that was done by a study, whether many factories or many siguro sa space academy or something, just the comfort room alone, safety and security, if you have pregnant employees, we have all the standards, but there is very low compliance with all of these policies. And then, as mentioned earlier by our speaker, also positive portrayal in media of women in STEM. We have very few models, increased number of females in leadership and decision-making position, both in government and private sector. And lastly, develop, strengthen current programs and services to address the many roles of women to pursue family, work family balance. Work and family balance is a very crucial issue. Now we just completed a study on the impact of COVID-19. I'm willing to share the study now. Together with Oxfam, we did it, and the tremendous problems being faced now because of the community lockdown. So thank you very much for listening to me, and I will entertain questions later.
Thank you very much, Dr. Soberchea. And we are glad to note CHED's programs in enabling more women and girls to undertake STEM-related courses, and particularly, especially on curriculum development and the use of gender-neutral language in textbooks. Sometimes I think if we're looking for encouragement, sometimes it can become disheartening if all the pronouns, puro he. So it's good that CHED has this program, that one way of encouraging the participation of women and girls in the science is to ensure that these textbooks, which serve as role models as well, or which serve as inspiration, that women and girls would be able to relate to these stories of women in space, or women in the space science sector. And we also thank you for the recommendations that true, there is a need to encourage more women and girls participation in certain STEM fields, particularly those that lead to a career in space science, and also the practical recommendations for the private sector that will give space a safe space for women. Now, at this point, we will take a 5-minute break to allow us to rest our eyes for a bit, or perhaps grab a cuppa. We will take this opportunity as well to make some technical adjustments for the next part of our program, the rapid fire discussion, where we will be joined by two speakers and also experts and practitioners in the field of space science. Now, I would like to remind our audience, if you have any questions for our panelists, kindly send them through the chat box if you are in the Zoom platform, or in the comment section if you are watching this on YouTube. And I note that there are already several who have asked questions, so please keep them coming. We have a dedicated team of chat moderators who are taking them, and later on we will see if we can put you on the spotlight, and make you ask your question directly. But do note that because of time constraints, maybe we would not be able to ask you, or maybe ask for you, your questions. So we beg your indulgence uh, in that in that regard. So we have an exciting lineup coming up. So don't go away, as we'll be back in 5. Welcome back to the webinar, Making Space for Women, Advancing Gender Equality in the Philippine Space Sector. For everyone's information, we have in our online audience students and representatives from the different public and private high schools in the Philippines, the different colleges and universities, as well as the science high schools all over the country. So a warm welcome to all of you, and I hope that you will find inspiration from this webinar and from our distinguished speakers in order to pursue a meaningful career in STEM and in space science in particular. We also have in our virtual audience school administrators, representatives from the media and also the legislature, as well as from the different departments and offices of the Philippine government. And also we have participants from our more than 60 or 80 plus foreign service posts. So warm greetings of good morning, good afternoon, or good evening to all of you. I know that we have some colleagues listening in from Europe. So yeah, it's what, 3 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning there. So thank you very much for tuning in. Now, as promised, in this second part of the webinar, we will be chatting with our speakers from this morning's session, Dr. Maricor Soriano and Dr. Caroline Sobrichea. And they are now joined by Dr. Gay Jane Perez, the Deputy Director General for Space Science and Technology at the Philippine Space Agency, and Engineer Josephine Santiago Bond of the Kennedy Space Center of the National Aeronautics and Space Administration of the United States. Now, just a little background on our panelists. First, we have Dr. J. Gain Perez, who, in addition to being the Deputy Director General at PhilSA, is also an associate professor and scientist too at the Institute of Environmental Science and Meteorology of the University of the Philippines. Now, prior to her appointment at PhilSA, Dr. Perez led various programs on satellite development in the Philippines and the use of satellite and remotely sensed data for environmental applications and climate studies. She is a recipient of the Outstanding Women in the Nation's Service Award. She's a Townie in 2009 and the first Filipino woman to receive the ASEAN US Science Prize for Women in 2018. She was a postdoctoral fellow at the NASA Goddard Space Flight Center from 2010 to 2011. And she holds a Bachelor of Science, a Master of Science, and a Doctor of Philosophy in Physics from UP Diliman. Next, we have Engineer Josephine Santiago Bond, who is joining us all the way from Florida, USA. She is currently the Chief of the Institutional Division of the Kennedy Space Center Safety and Mission Assurance, and previously served as Chief of the Flight Systems Engineering Branch and Chief of the Advanced Engineering Development Branch, and also the Chair of the Asian Pacific American Connection Employee Resource Group, also at the NASA Kennedy Space Center. She started her career at NASA as a graduate student cooperative intern in 2004. She has a Bachelor of Science degree in Electronics and Communications Engineering from UP Diliman, a Master of Science in Electrical Engineering at the South Dakota State University, and a graduate certificate in Space Systems Engineering from Stevens Institute of Technology. I hope that everyone, all of our speakers, as I've mentioned earlier, they will be joined by Dr. Soriano and also Dr. Sobrichea. So I hope everyone can see. And let's start off with Engineer Santiago Bond. Engineer Joe, if you won't mind me calling you Joe. How did you start your career at NASA?
Hi, good morning, everyone. Yeah, you can call me Joe. I go by Joe Santiago Bond, sometimes Joe Santiago, sometimes Joe Bond. I'll answer to anything. So I'm happy to be here during this Women in Space webinar as we make space for women. It's kind of a convoluted story, so if you'll let me. I was born in America to Filipino parents and I grew up in the Philippines and I came back to America as an adult. So just to kind of paint the picture, I come from a family of scientists and engineers, and I graduated from Philippine Science High School. So I had plenty of influence growing up to get into STEM. I had no lack of role models. I became an electronics and communications engineer from UP, but and then I proceeded to go to the United States to see what was out there for me. You know, that was the first time for me to go as an adult. And I decided at that time, there was a recession going on when I first came, that my best course of action is to take my master's. And so I did my master's in electrical engineering at South Dakota State University. And during that time, I felt like I was old enough to not ask for money from my parents. And so I took a job at Daktronics. And so I was an engineering trainee during that time. And that wasn't enough. So I took a second job at South Dakota State University. So I started as a teaching assistant and later on became a research assistant. So a project that I was working with my grad my grad advisor is how I got involved with NASA. So he himself was doing a faculty fellowship and I tagged along one summer. And it was this random offer from him for me to help him in his project. And so this is my shameless plug about when there's a door that's in front of you and it's not the door you expected and, you're not quite sure, give it a try. The door was at the SDSU, but somehow I found myself at Kennedy Space Center, and from that one summer with my advisor, I applied for the graduate cooperative internship, which is now called Pathways, slightly different program, but very similar. And then I got my permanent job at Kennedy Space Center. So you've heard my bio. I'm celebrating my 17th year as a civil servant. And my most recent stop is in safety and mission assurance. And it's also something that I never planned out. I've been in engineering all those, I'd say 15 other years of my career at KSC. And one day I got a tap on my shoulder that said, would you consider leading a combination of engineers and safety specialists and doing safety as your main job? It was a hesitant yes, but so today the main job that I fill is to make sure that the daily KSC activities are done safely for the sake of our employees, our partners, the public, and the high valued assets of NASA. So that's anything from protecting our folks from themselves, slips, trips, and falls, all the way to explosive safety, range safety, and providing various expertise.
Wow, thank you. Now, Joe, you have heard the presentation of Marcus Walton earlier and also of Dr. Sabrichea about the seeming gap, the seeming gender gap in the field of STEM, particularly in the space science sector. So let me ask you, what does it take to be a woman in a male-dominated industry?
So I would say the first two things that come to my mind are determination and tenacity. You have to have your goal in mind. Your goal in mind is probably not to be the first female something. Your goal in mind is to do some good in the world. And so do your research and what's required to be able to accomplish that goal. Posture yourself to be qualified and have an edge over, there's a lot of competition. We'll all have to agree that is the case. Find the thing that makes you stand out or strive to be good at something that will make you stand out. There's hurdles you can, in doing your research, you should be able to identify the different hurdles that are going to be in front of you and be ready for those as much as you can. Some of them you can work on your own, and some of them you'll need to have some kind of sponsorship or help from others. Think about those hurdles as an opportunity to figure out how you could reinvent yourself, how to adjust, maybe how to help the organization adjust if the organization needs help in making the environment a little bit woman friendly, and sometimes they don't know that that is the case. Sometimes they think that the status quo is okay for women until a woman comes in the picture. Unfortunately, not every path is going to be paved ahead of you. So that this is when you start hearing like you're the first this kind. And so, sometimes organizations need help in identifying what things they can improve on. And you can be a big part of that. So imagine like making it better for yourself and making it better for all the other women that follow you. And all the things that I heard with our speakers prior to this rapid fire. Restrooms. So when I first came to KSC, the building that I was in, it was a small building, only 2 floors, but you could only use the women's restroom downstairs, because in the past they were used during the Apollo program, and there were not a lot of women during the Apollo program. And during my time, I was glad to see that they renovated and added more women's restroom because the numbers have increased since then. Processes, sometimes the processes are just done a certain way and they weren't really purposely thinking of women in mind. So an example might be, so Mr. Waltran mentioned the spacewalk of the two female spacewalk. So the first attempt for that didn't work out because they realized that they didn't have enough of the petite size spacesuits. And, so it kind of sounds like, well, why don't they have 2 of those, but these are $1 million spacesuits, maybe even more. And so they make it in size ranges that are, that can cover a whole range of astronauts in the Corps. And we don't have a lot of women of a certain size. So, but it was eye-opening for the agency to see that. And of course, they did something about that. So that's what I'll share for now.
Thank you. Thank you for that. That's good advice, that you have shared earlier on. Let me veer off a little. Did you ever feel discriminated against because of your gender when you first entered NASA?
So, being female and minority and young looking, I couldn't tell, which is good when you're first, which is good as you grow older. But as you're coming in and you already, I came in with a graduate degree, and people still thought that I was an intern. So there's a little bit of like, questioning in my mind about like, are they taking me seriously? When I'm bringing up something, are they taking my input seriously? And I think that with time, people did take me seriously. But I don't think that was a woman specific hurdle. I think it's just, as people get to know you, then they respect your thoughts a little bit better because they understand where you're coming from. I would say, so shameless plug, I'm sure at KSC, we have areas that we could improve on. Like it's not perfect. There's microaggressions that happen every day, off-color jokes, and it's up to us to say, hey, that's not cool. And our organization is very, what do you call it? It's very suited to push back like that. We have a process to report certain things. We have a process to address it at the low level. We have women's groups that help you out. So there's a whole lot of things that allow you to function as a woman without fearing discrimination. However, that was probably not always the case. So it took many years for that to get there. And so, there's always this thing about like revisiting your processes and revisiting just the way you do things, because the status quo did come from a very male-dominated environment.
Thank you. Thank you for that. For Dr. Perez, did you have a similar experience working in the space science sector here in the Philippines? And similar question to what I've posed to Engineer Joe, what does it take to be a woman in a male-dominated industry? I know that 70% of the employees at PhilSA are women. So maybe it's not too male dominated, but your thoughts on this, Dr. Perez?
Well, first of all, good morning, everyone. I'm happy to be here. So I'll get to your questions, but first I would like to say that I was fortunate that I had an enabling environment as I advanced my career in space science. First, the scholarship I got from DOST SEI supported me to finish a degree in applied physics, which gave me a solid foundation on concepts and theories behind space science and technology. There, I was nurtured by mentors, men and women alike, including Dr. Maricor Soriano, who's with us this morning, to develop passion in doing research, especially in the Philippine setting. So when I was given the opportunity to work at NASA, I saw firsthand why a lot of people dream or aspire to work there or in space sector in general. There I saw how ideas are cultivated and translated into technologies that later provide solutions for the benefit of the society. I witnessed how scientists, engineers, communicators, and everybody else work together and collaborate towards the success of space missions. They encourage diversity in the workforce where women's contributions are given the same importance as men's. Experiencing all these things firsthand, I can't help but dream to have the same for the country. So going back, it was quite serendipitous that space science and technology in the country is ramping up. So I had the opportunity to be part of the Phil Microsat program as one of the project leaders, taking the lead on the science side, the mission of the satellite and its operation later on. And I have to say that the statistics that you heard today about 70% women in PhilSA, it hasn't always been the case. In fact, back then, out of the 5 project leaders, I'm the only one woman in the team. And the engineers who built Diwata 1, out of 9 of them, only 1 is a woman. And actually, the figures that was presented by Dr. Soriano a while ago, that sort of show what it is right now in terms of the Stamina for Space program. So at PhilSA, which is where we will be, where the Stamina for Space eventually would transition to, it's very interesting that we have a lot of women now. And I would say it's because right now it's really a combination of STEM as well as the other fields like legal, international cooperation, and even human resources. But really, we hope that we'll keep close to this number. I guess it's hard to say that it will be at that percentage uh, for long. I can imagine eventually it will go down as we get more STEM track personnel in the agency. But I hope it won't be, well, I hope it'll meet like half or close to half ratio. So
Yeah, let's hope to keep that number, that high number. Now, similar to what Joe has shared earlier, what advice can you share? What advice can you give women and young girls, women who are in the early stages of their STEM careers, and young girls who are interested in pursuing a STEM career?
yes, actually, Engineer Joe has already said a lot of important things on what it takes to be a woman in this male dominated field. So, my advice for young women first is not to be afraid to try out all the opportunities. So, as Joe mentioned, it's getting in and to an open door, which leads her to somewhere. So, let's grab these opportunities, whatever it may be, and explore our interests. This is how you will find an environment where you can thrive and meet your potential mentors, just like what happened to me. I also want to dispel a common misconception on what it takes to get into the field of space science and technology. I want to make it clear that you don't need to have to take courses like astronomy or cosmos science to be space scientists and engineers. Though these courses are helpful and valuable, this is not the only means to work in this growing field of space science. Actually, many of those who have a career in space science actually did not dive into this field of space science right away. They took courses in science, like myself, I took physics, and many took different courses in engineering, just like Engineer Joe, right? So what we really value in this field is the character of a scientist or an engineer. It's not about the field that you take or the course that you take, but the kind of values you embody. We want to mold a kind of person, a kind of scientist and engineer who embodies the core tenets of critical thinking, curiosity, integrity, and creativity.
Thank you. Good advice, Dr. Perez. Now, it seems that from what you and Engineer Joe have shared, no, once you're there, once you're already in that career, in that position, it seems that gender does not have any issue because it's all about your capability. It's all about merit. But I think the problem here is getting there. You know, somehow the that break that need to break that glass ceiling, or that need to go through that really narrow tunnel before finally the world or space opens up for you, know, because right now statistics show that the number of women in STEM careers is lower than the number of men in these fields, particularly in the space science sector. I know that there are STEM careers that are more women centered, such as in the medical field, I think, and in nursing as well. But there are some, especially those that directly relate to space science. We tend to have a small representation, or women tend to have less representation there. Now, it's been said that possible factors contributing to the discrepancy could be the lack of female role models, gender stereotyping. I know when I was when I was young, uh, I've always heard that engineering is a man's job, you know, rather than a job for women. So sabi sa akin, mag-med ka na lang, di ba? Mag-medicine ka na lang. And perhaps less family-friendly flexibility in the STEM fields. What is your opinion on this, Dr. Perez?
Yes, well, I agree. And the presentation earlier already alluded to these different factors. So to add to that, okay, sorry for the dog. A study by MIT actually highlighted a few factors as to why career mobility becomes increasingly harder for women in STEM. So among those already mentioned, these include marriage, childbirth, pregnancy discrimination, and sometimes sexual harassment in the workplace. So, so we have to address these issues. However, we must recognize that the issue of the discrepancy in the number of women and men in STEM jobs is rather a systemic problem caused by interconnected factors. Addressing only one of the many factors in this long list cannot solve the entire issue. We need to think of this as a web of interrelated factors rather than phenomena that are in isolation from each other. So that way, we can comprehensively and holistically find ways to address this discrepancy and encourage more women in the field.
Thank you, Dr. Perez. I go now to Dr. Soriano. Do you also agree with that statement, the one that I mentioned earlier?
Absolutely, ma'am. You see, it's not only our job to assert ourselves in STEM or in engineering fields or in jobs that require STEM. The push must also be from the other side. We must also encourage men to be more welcoming of women and encourage the workplace to be, as Dr. Caroline said, more conducive to women. I'm glad that right now we have the expanded maternity law. It was just recently enacted in 2019 because back then it was just 2 months for maternity leave. Now it's 4 months, and even the father can join in child rearing. And the pandemic showed us that, hey, we can work from home. And in fact, when you do research, or when you do work in, for example, in our field in satellite technology, a lot of work is done in silico, meaning a lot of things have to be done by simulation first. So this can be done at home, as what we are doing now. Okay. So back to the question. Yes, I agree that it is a web, it is systemic. So not only from us, the push should not only come from us, but from several folks should be more welcoming of women and should be respectful of women. Our leaders should also be like that, and our laws should also be like that. Our workplace should be like that.
Well noted, Dr. Soriano. Let me go now again to Engineer Joe. I know you mentioned this already earlier, but if you could look back when you first started out, I know you come from a long line of engineers, so there was no shortage of role models for you. And therefore perhaps maybe not a lot of young girls would have a similar role model, but perhaps they can take inspiration from you because you were able to make a successful career choice. But when you were starting out, did you ever feel that your being a woman made your career choice more difficult?
I think my short answer is no. Um, the like you said, I come from. It's actually more on the sciences in my family. I was the first female engineer, but I did have an uncle and my now brother-in-law who were taking engineering as I was growing up. And so it never really occurred to me that women couldn't do the same things that men did because I had really strong women in my family. And it helps to have that visual, right? Like I just didn't know any better. All of them were strong women. There was no question in my mind that I could do it. Um, these days, with the internet and also like we have right now, there's more access to role models, right? There's almost, as long as you have internet, so that's the discriminating factor. Um, there shouldn't be a shortage of role models. But not everyone has access to the internet. And so we're really trying to reach out to those individuals who are already at a disadvantage that way, technology wise, and maybe not as driven. So like the driven people, you throw them in anything and they'll thrive. You don't even need to change the status quo and they'll find a way to survive. But it's trying to open the environment up to those people who may be on the fence, who are not convinced that they can do it, who need a little bit of boost of encouragement. And I just wanted to share, part of my story, my personal story of why I never really thought of women being lacking in terms of intelligence and capability. My class in Philippine Science High School, batch 96, the top 3 in my class were all women. And so it was just like, that's not even a question. But the other thing I was going to throw in there is if you're starting out and there's a whole lot of companies to consider, there's a whole lot of, with each of these companies, there's a different company culture that comes along with it. Do your research. It's not always the pay that you should follow. Like there are companies that pay a lot, that's great. But if you can find something that pays decent wage and also has a good company culture, that's like the jackpot. Some companies are better than others in terms of women's and flexibilities in general, workplace flexibilities. And so, trying to find alignment and what's important to you. If time with family is important to you, then look for something that allows you to spend time with your family. I was going to share too. I didn't know this when I went to work for Kennedy Space Center, but NASA has been, I think now 9th year in a row, the best place to work in the federal government for an agency of that size, which is pretty large. And then they also rank that, so they rank that based on employee feedback. So it's not like, you know, NASA just said it. It's employees submitting some survey results every year after year, and they compare those things. And out of the NASA, the 10 NASA centers, Kennedy Space Center has been #1. So that's really trying to paint a picture of how happy the employees are with how things are being handled by the leadership. And that includes balance at the top. So I look at the top tier at Kennedy Space Center, and it's half women, half men. And that's what a better way to, you know, there's no better way to demonstrate it.
That's right. For those who were watching the Mars landing of the Perseverance, you can see a lot of women being in charge of a number of aspects of the Mars landing. So it's excuse me. So it's good to know that. So let's try to focus in on those institutional barriers, or for that matter, the stereotypes that seem to prohibit, or that seem to keep young women and girls from going into the sciences, because we now know that once they go in there, they will thrive, and there will be opportunities for them, you know. But the problem is, you know, getting them, pushing them to take that to take that path. So let me now go to Dr. Sobrichea, and again, thank you for your presentation earlier. Let me ask, what in your opinion contributes to the stereotype or the thinking that some STEM careers are only for men, or why certain STEM careers are more dominated by men? Dr.
Well,
Carol?
it's the employment sector. We have to engage the private and government sector. The bias, so sa UP nga, no, and all other colleges, if you look at the UPCAT, more females qualify, ang tataas ng grade nila. But when they enter the field of employment, that's where the problem comes in. So the marketing that we have to do is to make the industry really female friendly, so that the female are better encouraged to enter the field. Sinabi na natin yung maternity leave, yung comfort room, yung mga ganun. But more than that, siguro, more than that, ako nga the reason why I became gender sensitive lang, katulad ng mga speakers natin, is I had to go to the United States to study. Of course, when I went back to UP, talagang ginalugad na namin ng lahat ng ito. I think we have to engage the industry to make it very women friendly, not to mention the salary, the space, the policy, lalo na yung policy, so that when the girls are encouraged, to go there. Let me give you lang one example, no? So kunyari sa Philippine National Police at saka sa National Defense College, we had to really create a GAD program there. Yung uniform, imagine nung unang panahon, ayaw nila na nakapantalo ng babae. Aakyat sa barko, aakyat sa ano. So just to get the women to also wear pants. Gusto nila naka-skirt. So I think it took us 10 years to get, ngayon meron na kayong mga police women na so it's really a struggle, but make the space where women work really gender friendly to encourage our girls to study. Pero ma'am, may tanong ako sa mga kasama ko pwede ba ako magtanong?
Go ahead, Dr. Carol.
Mga kasama ko sa UP, PSA, at saka yung paano nyo tinutulungan ng ibang schools? Kasi bagsak din talaga yung ang STEM, lalo na sa mga universities sa sa probinsya, sa Mindanao halimbawa, na kailangan natin ng mga STEM graduates. Paano tumutulong yung mga kabarkada ko diyan sa loob ng Diliman? How do you influence? How do you encourage, or how do you influence the other schools?
Yeah, I was actually just going to ask that the same question that I asked you to Dr. Soriano, because you have mentioned, Dr. Carol, about the need for the private sector, you know, to also ramp up the space, or to make the space more conducive to women. But your question, I think, will also can also be answered by Dr. Soriano and Dr. Perez, because they are also professors in physics at the University of the Philippines. So, Dr. Soriano, your comments, please.
Yes, I wanted to raise my hand at the first paragraph of Dr. Caroline, because first of all, before I answer that question about what we at UP do for the rest of the HEIs, I'd like to say, I'd like to share my experience hiring for Stamina for Space. Now, recall I gave you the figures that 4 out of 10 applicants in Stamina for Space were women. And then and in the end, you know, we have one third, roughly one third of the staff are women. When I was interviewing applicants, you know, there was favor over those who have, of course, industry experience. And who are these but semiconductor or electrical engineering industries? They're women. That's no problem if they're qualified in Stamina Force for men. So I agree with Dr. Saviche that there are not many women in industry, and this could be better. Now, on to what UP is doing. Uh, well, one positive thing that came out of this pandemic is we are forced to create modules. And actually, UP is sort of about to share this publicly. And we at the Stamina for Space are also preparing modules, and we have actually a network of a consortium, so to speak, for space science. Actually, we currently have a consortium of space science, several universities across the Philippines. So two things. What are we doing? We are sharing. In a way, thanks to this pandemic, the lessons, the modules are being made into something that can be shareable to other schools. And secondly, there is actually consortium of different HEIs on space science.
Thank you for that, Dr. Soriano. Do you believe that affirmative action or a quota system would be helpful in encouraging more women to engage in traditionally male-dominated STEM fields? You know, yung parang talagang i-push mo sila, parang kunin na from uh, from from everywhere. Put them in a quota, or have a quota system, more affirmative action in order to encourage more women to take it. Do you think do you think this would work, or perhaps why do you think this will not work?
For me, I think something like this has already happened before. This kind of affirmative action, putting a quota on how many from different regions in the Philippines will get into UP. So something like this, similar to this, has happened before, but not gender. It's more of making some quota across regions so that there would be some sort of evenness. So what happened then, perhaps as an analogy, was that the very best people were not accepted. Some of the very good people, some of the good students were not accepted because there was a quota on how many can be accepted from NCR. Okay, so was this good or bad? Uh, as a scientist, I can say if it's good. We should look at the numbers, because this happened at some period in the university's history, and I don't know the result of that, putting a quota like that. How about if we put a quota on girls? I don't know. I really don't know the answer to that. Um, However, as Dr. Sabiche said, you know, the number of applicants anyway and the number who pass through UP are at parity. It's not so bad. So, and as Engineer Joe said, whoa, top three all women. So I think getting into UP, it's no problem. it's getting higher and higher in the graduate degrees. That's where the problem lies, perhaps.
That's right. That's right. As I was mentioning earlier, when once you have broken that barrier or that glass ceiling, you will know that somehow gender is no longer an issue when it comes to your career in the space science, but it is the manner of getting there. It is the manner of encouraging more women and girls to take up masters. So I guess it's more of that, no. Wala tayong problema when it comes to yung dun sa Bachelor of Arts or sa Bachelor of Science, but somehow undergoing further studies for women, that is no longer an option, or it becomes a limit, or their choice to do that is somehow limited. And it would seem that to be engaged in the science sector, you must have a PhD, you must have a master's, you must have further studies. Your opinion, Dr. Perez?
Okay, yeah. Um, Right. So actually, while you're mentioning that, like losing them after bachelor's degree, because we have a lot up to bachelor's. Um, so we will go back to the factors that that may be come in the way for them to, instead of pursuing master's or higher degrees or PhD. And one of them, obviously, is maybe personal matters like building a family. And for women, we must acknowledge that that time is also the prime time if you think about building a family. So, and it coincides really. And earlier there was a question of making choices, and maybe most of women actually have to make some of these choices, and which brings me really to what one of the things that I've been thinking about also, like in terms of not really in quota but in terms of measuring success of women and men. Like in the university, we have uh, promotion, awards, etc. And the same rules apply for women and men. So the same number of years are applied to both. Like you have to meet X numbers of publication by X number of years. So it's the same equation for both men and women. And I think this equation, this is where we can start possibly introducing some change, acknowledging that women may have a different timeline than men. So perhaps the government can think of, or maybe institutions to begin with, can start thinking of maybe we should apply a different set of benchmarks or standard for men, giving them more time. So I'll give a very concrete example, like the recognition of outstanding young scientists. The definition of young is 40, at least in the Philippines, for both men and women. So it's the same for both. Now, imagine if, considering that maybe women would take some time leave, some time to take a leave to rear a child and factor it in the equation, maybe 2 or 3 kids. So maybe you add that because they have to catch up eventually, and say for women, you make it 45 or 50 because they will do something else in between. So maybe, just maybe, that could give some leverage or some opportunity for women. So just something very specific that comes to my mind regarding quotas and thresholds.
Thank you for those insights, Dr. Perez. It would appear that our problem is not sex, and it's not gender, but it's age now, because you're correct. A number of scholarships are limited to, they say that if you go into the science sector, you must be below 40. But you're correct. For those women who want to bear children, therefore the biological clock, so to say, is ticking, and therefore they have to undertake this if they do so decide at this early stage, which also coincides with the peak, or just about the time when they should be undertaking higher studies, further studies. Let me go back now to Engineer Joe. Do you have other ideas why there are fewer women in the STEM fields, or what limits them from undertaking further studies
Yeah.
in this
So
field?
there's a few. I mean, I think the general themes have been mentioned, but I just wanted to talk about gender stereotyping a little bit. So it's a combination of outside and inside the person. So it's exterior to the person. Your companies, organizations might have an idea of what females want or don't want, and they don't necessarily ask individuals, and this is really an individual choice. So just as an example, I interviewed, before I left the Philippines, I interviewed for a cadet engineer position at one of the big telecom companies. That was my dream job, to be a cadet engineer when I graduated from ECE. And I think they had 5 rounds of interviews, and the pay wasn't even that great, but I needed that experience. And at the end of it, I decided I wasn't gonna. I was at the last set of interviews, and I had to inform them that I couldn't join the cohort because I was heading to the U.S. and they weren't willing to defer my application to the next batch. I had to reapply all over again. So so it turned out, so I lived the regret for a little bit, like I always thought about like, I should have taken that job first before I left. And, but one of my batchmates who actually took the job, he said, good thing you didn't take it, because they were asking us to climb up poles, like telecom poles. And that was part of the training. And he said it in such a way that he thought if I had gotten the job, I wouldn't have enjoyed it because there was that aspect of it. And I'm like, I wouldn't have cared. I would have done it. I would have enjoyed it, So, and there's these things too, like travel. I, I like to travel for work because I have friends all over the place. Just, when I travel for work, I look for my friends, I meet up with them at, after work. And so, I mean, to paint the picture, I was traveling up to 35 months pregnant. And I think that's around the time that they tell you not to fly anymore, or that you have to present a doctor's note to, for them to let you on. But, and I did it, calculated the risks, I'm going to go cross country. I was going to California from Florida. I might have my baby over there, but you know what? I need to travel for work, and I do want to travel for work. I'm willing to do it. And I was taking my husband with me. So I paid for my husband's fare so he could travel with me in case we had our baby all the way to the other side of the country. So, but people assumed that I wouldn't want to travel. And when I had my baby, they assumed that I didn't want to travel because I had a small child. And so it didn't occur to me that they weren't giving me trips until maybe 15 months down the road. And someone said, well, can you travel? It's been long enough. And I was thinking, long enough for what? So I was thinking, were you holding back all these 15 months? Yeah. So someone was making the decision for me without me knowing it. So I think that the lesson that I learned from that is to be explicit in what you want. If I wanted to travel, I should have told them, hey, I'm okay to travel. Even though I have a child, I can make arrangements. I actually thought about this in my head. I was taking my child, I was taking another adult with me. I was going to make it work because I wanted to do it. Also, gender stereotyping, it can come from inside, right? There's our idea of how a female should act, like a proper female. And and sometimes that stops us from doing things that we would probably enjoy doing because medyo wapoys, or kind of like the climbing up a thing. If you actually were faced with a decision, you might hesitate because it isn't the glamorous type of job that you kind of imagine for a female. So, and then some of it is a little bit, I think, of some negative self-talk. I think females are just harder on themselves. I don't know, that might be a generalization, but I feel like we are harder on ourselves. And there has to be a little bit of forgiveness, when you fail, you have little failures here and there has to be a little bit of forgiveness and resiliency, being able to adjust and, gather yourself and try again, or, so those kinds of things. And then there's more that the organizations can do about it. Dr. Gay mentioned some of them. And then to add, if we keep recruiting girls, to get into STEM, if we keep recruiting in the same places where there's already a large disparity, then what's the result? I mean, the result is going to be the same, right? And so, we need to cast a wider net. We need to go to places, and I'm not really advocating for the quota system because it kind of overshadows the capability of the woman. And there's always that doubt that maybe I was taken because of the quota and not really based on my capability. But I do agree that we have to cast a wider net in terms of tapping into those recruitment areas that we haven't in the past. So, we have science high schools everywhere, and we kind of expect that the products of the science high schools are going to go into science and technology. But how about the other schools? Do we give the other schools as much focus on STEM? Do we do the same for public and private, or are the private schools left to their own defenses and financial capabilities? And just kind of looking back, because for grade school, I was a product of an all-girls school. I can't remember during my time any emphasis on STEM. There was a lot of emphasis on entrepreneurship and that kind of stuff, but STEM wasn't. And the private schools are really where they make a bigger distinction between girls and boys. That's where you have less co-ed schools and more exclusive schools. So those are a few areas that I think we could cast a wider net.
Thank you for that, Engineer Joe. So following what you have just mentioned, I turn now to Dr. Perez. What further recommendations can you offer on how the Philippine government as a whole, or even DOST, can create? How can the Philippine government create an enabling environment for women to thrive and excel in the STEM fields? Dr. Perez?
Okay, so finding my unmute button, sorry about that. Engineer Joe already said a lot of good points. Actually, I just would like to add to what you said. I also came from an all-girls school. From elementary to high school, I went to an exclusive all-girls private school. So yeah, in terms of what the government can do, so as I've been mentioning earlier, it has to be a holistic approach, not really just focusing on one part of the problem, but take a look at it in an integrative manner. So starting with STEM, or like the basic education. So you were asking earlier, what are we doing? Dr. Caroline has a question for us. What are we doing in UP? Because our STEM is also like suffering perhaps. And I had an experience on that, really, like a group of students from a STEM track school visited us, and then I asked randomly who wanted to be a scientist or an engineer, and I didn't see any, or I saw I think one or two hands. So they're already on the STEM track, but what they think of, like what kind of STEM field they'll pursue, is more on health and medicine related, which is still STEM. That's fine, but we have to make them more aware, I guess, program that promote awareness on the different fields of STEM. And I think that's where space would come in. It's actually a very interesting field for a child. You know, space, it's really cool, it's amazing, and we can take advantage of it to trigger interest of kids, and shape them to become curious thinkers, to become critical thinkers. And for PhilSA, so what we're doing, so we are just new, and we are building up at the moment, but there is a division in PhilSA, which is on space education and scholarship division, which would create programs from basic education, STEM, all the way to graduate degrees, to try to see and try to impart space education and help promote interest for students to pursue career in STEM. So that's concrete, at least for PhilSA, and I'm sure similar efforts can be done across different agencies.
Thank you for that, Dr. Perez. It's interesting, you know, when you mentioned about how kids are automatically, or are in the stars, space, the night sky automatically gets them interested in science. So in addition to worms, you know, for those who want to go into biology, you know, worms and stars, they are our entry points to these STEM fields. Dr. Soriano, your thoughts on the matter, please.
Before I start, I'd like to third the motion. I'm also a product of a Catholic all-girls school, high school, Immaculate Heart of Mary College, 54 Aurora Boulevard, run by the Daughters of Charity. Okay, so one concrete thing the government can do is to address digital poverty, meaning internet access, as Engineer Joe pointed out earlier. It's so very obvious these days when we're studying from home. Even rich kids, no, if they are in the province, and in their province there is poor internet connection, they still are under digital poverty. So one practical thing the government can do is improve the internet across the Philippines. And the future of education is self-learning. Self-learning. In fact, there's so many um, materials online that can allow you to get images from NASA and process them yourselves. You can learn Python online and learn that remote sensing techniques, image processing techniques online. And as young people can learn this on their own if they only have a nice connection to internet.
Nice connection and mentors as well. And I think that's one of our key takeaways in this webinar. The Space for Women program of UNOSA mentioned the importance of mentoring. So and before we switch to the questions from the audience, may I ask this final question to all our panelists? What effective ways can women, or you, play as mentors or role models for other women and young girls who wish to pursue a career in space science? And if I may further add, now, what effective ways can men play in promoting the development and success of their female colleagues in the STEM field, or space science sector? How about we start with Dr. Sobrichea? Dr. Carol?
Can you hear me now? Sorry, I had to unmute it.
Yes.
Since I am a social scientist, when we were having our initial discussion, the first thing has to do with marketing. So maybe social science and the humanities could come in. How do we package the product to make it more attractive to girls, no? So positivity, developing positivity, ensuring. So kasi nung bahala na yung talagang mga physicist at saka yung mga nasa physical sciences and engineering sciences. Siguro ang role namin sa social science is to create the enabling environment through narratives, through use of humanities and use of language, no, to encourage them to go into the sciences. But beyond that, of course, let's ensure that the space they will get into is safe for pregnant women, is safe for single women, for women of different sexual orientation and identity, young and old. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. I also had to unmute myself. Sorry. Dr. Soriano, your thoughts, please.
I agree with Dr. Carol that we should put ourselves out there. I mean, sometimes nakakahiya na because, parang couple mocks na kami, we're all over the place. But I think we still need to show our young girls that, hey, there are ladies in this field. If we can do it, you can do it too. That's one. I agree with that. Be more present in social media. Again, and one more thing, be present as mentors. So Gay and I actually have laboratories of our own, and we do mentor students for their thesis. So that's one way we can contribute, mentoring, and giving perhaps special attention, if not quota, at least special attention to the girls in STEM. So that's from the lady side. How about from our
That's right.
men's side? As I said earlier, make the place conducive for women. I work with several fields. So one time in one project, I had mechanical engineering guys in my project, and they have their jokes, sexist jokes, and the things that they carry with them to the lab are nude women. I mean, cover of their laptop was a poster of nude women. I said that cannot be, that is not acceptable in my lab. So it's also from the men's side, they must be made to be more gender sensitive, right? And not only for women, okay, for all types of genders in this gender spectrum. So let's just be respectful of one another. So that's what the men should be. And it's hard if you are in a place which is misogynist, especially if on the top you have some misogynists there. So and we have to push back as well as women, but also we have to educate them that make the place safe for women. Okay.
Thank you for that, Dr. Soriano. Dr. Perez, your turn.
Okay, so if I might just add to what Dr. Soriano said, aside from being gender sensitive, we can also strive to be gender aware in our methodologies. So dispelling stereotype, yes, but there should also be a recognition on the fundamental differences. Of course, our anatomy is different, as well as the way we think and the way we are designed, but it doesn't mean that women are inferior or the other way around. So it just simply means there are some differences, and we are different, and that we are just one part of what makes our society diverse. And actually, that's very important to recognize, and that contribution is something that has to be nurtured. So our scientific and technological developments and products must always take this diversity into account. So that's both for men and women.
Understood. Engineer Joe, your thoughts. I think you're on mute, Engineer Joe.
Oh, okay. Can you hear me now? Yes. So I would like to encourage girls and women to not take yourself out of the game before you've even started. Try to experience it and see how far you can go before being afraid of the obstacles before you've even faced them, right? So, if you're thinking of having getting married, having kids, and you're already saying, well, I'm not going to sign up for that because that's like a few years down the road and I want to get married, by that time, that's planning ahead too far out. A lot of things can change, and, you can have both goals and you can just see, where it lies in the timeline. But balancing that career and family, it doesn't have to be a 50-50 every day. Every meeting, every family event is a decision point, and you can decide at that point which one you go to and which one you don't. If you're married or if you're getting married, a supportive husband plays a big role in you being able to achieve some kind of balance. I'm fortunate to have an engineer husband who understands exactly what I'm going through, and he plays an active role in raising our child, and doing housework, and all those things. And that's the only reason that I can do these things. Like, that's the only reason why I can speak to you here when I'm not actually at work. And so male spousal support is really important, especially for STEM. Men can be advocates in the workplace too. So educating them, like the other panelists have mentioned, but going beyond dispelling stereotypes. If it is a room full of men making decisions, they can be our sponsors too, right? When they hear things like, well, let's not go with that female because she's not assertive enough. Well, maybe she has a different style. Maybe she's assertive in her own quiet way. It doesn't have to be always the loudest person in the room that is effective. And so men can be those. They can counter the bias that exists in the workplace.
Very well said, our panelists. Thank you very much for that. And now we open the floor for questions. We have quite a lot and quite varied, talagang rapid fire from all over. And thank you very much to our audience as well for participating. We have a few here, and I would like to put them. I hope that they could share their video. We have Miss Angelica Ayalin, a chemical engineering graduate applying for MS Physics for the cohort 2021-2023, and she has a question. Angelica, are you online? Would you like to ask your question to our panelists?
Hello, can everyone hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you again for this webinar opportunity. So hello everyone, I am Angelica Ayalin, BS Chemical Engineering graduate from UP Dalaman. I was a former manager at a manufacturing plant in Procter & Gamble, and now applying for MS Physics at NIP in UP Dalaman as well. So my question is, if you could recommend a path or step-by-step guide for us women and girls who want to pursue a career in space as scientists and engineers, what would you recommend? What I mean is which degrees, bachelor's, master's, PhD, which universities, what jobs or research experience do we need? Do we need trainings abroad or experience abroad in institutes outside or here? I know there's no one path, as the speakers have already shared, and we will do whatever it takes if we are passionate enough, right? But just for us to have an idea or framework that we could benchmark on, what would you personally recommend as steps or a path or guide for us? Thank you.
Interesting question. You're correct. There are different paths. So let's choose. So who wants to answer that? Come on. Dr. Maricor. Okay, Dr. Maricor, go ahead.
Who knows? We might be welcoming Angelica very
I
soon
hope
in our
so.
program. Good luck to you. I must dispel first the impression that you have to be an engineer or a scientist to join space. Do you know that we need a lot of communicators? Because what is the use of all these all these technologies and all these images if we cannot share them with the people and to decision makers? So first of all, guys, all those listening, if you're from from Philippine science, but you have an art, or if you're STEM, but you have an artistic bent, oh my goodness, you're good. You can join as a communicator, as a science communicator, for okay, Philippine Space Agency. Okay, so that aside, so um, so we have lawyers, engineers, artists, and communicators, etc. So builders, creators, thinkers, etc. Uh, so what's your strength? It depends on you. So if you're very good with analytics, go ahead and hone yourself in say remote sensing, image processing, etc., and go to a field that does that. Okay, it helps to have some experience in industry, because I have realized working in Stamina for Space, I'm from academe, but now we have to interface with industry, that to build something that will work in space the first time, you need to meet some very strict requirements and tolerances. We have what is called requirement compliance verification matrix, and we have to go through these very carefully when we build the product for space. So what helps among our applicants is some industry experience. So if you, for example, already have a degree, see if you can get some industry experience to get the work knowledge in say systems engineering, or knowing how to build something that will work the first time. If you're going towards that, if you want to build something for space, if you want to go to the downstream technologies wherein you want to process data coming from space, then you should, it helps that you know how to program, because a lot of this image processing is programming, and coding, as I said earlier, can be learned on your own. Of course, here we are, we have mentors here all around, and you can talk to these mentors. Okay, and there is a wealth of data everywhere. I mean, NASA, they have a database, and we also have a database in Stamina for Space and Fields. Like, you can download these data and practice on them. Okay, so that's my take.
Thank you, Dr. Maricor. Definitely, the path towards the stars is not straightforward. It needs a lot of tenacity, a lot of grit, a lot of determination in order to get there. And I think what Dr. Soriano wants to impart here is that you can fashion your own path. You can figure out for yourself which courses to take, what fields to specialize in, because the field of space science is very holistic. It's not just engineering. There's a lot of physics, there's a lot of chemistry, there's a lot of biology even. So yeah, you're free to choose your path. Get the specialization that you will need, and inevitably, if you're really passionate about it, you will find your space in space science. I have a very interesting question here from let me just pull that up, from Mr. Jonil de los Reyes. He is a high school student. He's a male high school student from the Malayan colleges in Davao. Jonil, are you online? Kindly ask your question, please. If you are on mute, you have to unmute yourself first.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. Okay, so I would just like to ask, national space agencies are trying to address the systematic gender gap in their institution. UAE's space agency are having 40% of their workforce with women. Also, JAXA admits, that there is really a lacking representation of women. Now that the Philippines, especially, is trying to address this, the systematic gender gap, um, how uh, how does the institution, now that it's making space for women, will it affect the institution's international collaboration? Yeah, international collaborations with other countries, space agencies. Yeah.
Dr. Carol, I think that that question is for you. Basically, it's saying that since the industry right now is so male dominated, wouldn't the introduction of women disrupt the whole the whole process, or would it somehow you know make it more challenging for women?
Yeah.
Dr. Carol, your thoughts?
Uh, just a moment. I'll just get my dog to stop. Just a moment. And allow me to say that. Luckily for us, we have international agreements. Most countries in the United Nations have signed agreements to promote gender equality across all fields. And in fact, you get a plus points if you are gender sensitive and you want to study. Uh, well, I don't know if I'm going to advertise this, but I am a Fulbright scholar and I graduated from a university in the United States, and all the campuses in the US now lack students. So you can go to the United States and they're very happy to take in Filipinos because Filipinos are very studious, very intelligent. What I'm trying to say is you get a plus point if you are gender sensitive across many countries. The International Declaration on the Rights of Women is one international document that is the most popular. It has been signed by 183 countries or something. So it's not a deterrent, it's a plus point if you are gender sensitive.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much for that question and for that answer as well, Dr. Sobrichea. We have a lot of questions, really. Like I said, I'm sorry if I'm just giving it. If I'm not allowing the panelists to answer all of them, no. But we have also online Miss Angelica Chan. Let me just pull up. Angelica Chan is a student at Philippine Science High School. Miss Chan, go ahead.
Good morning po. My question is a pretty simple one lang po. Let me just pull it up. What is the greatest achievement in astronomy accomplished by a Filipina?
O yan, meron ng sagot si Dr. Soriano. Go ahead, Maricor.
Google Dr. Reynabel Reyes. Google Dr. Reynabel Reyes. What did she do? She proved Einstein right. I mean, actually, what she did was applying big data on stars, images of stars, and finding out that what Einstein said actually works on stars. So that's further proof. So Google Dr. Reynabel Reyes.
There you go. Quick answer, Dr. Reynabel Reyes. We also have online. Oh, yes, Dr. Perez, you wanted to add something more.
Yes, I'd like to add. Hi, Angelica. Hi. So that's you're correct. It's a very simple question, and you got a very straightforward answer from Dr. Soriano, and I agree with her. But I just want to add a few notes there. While of course we are thinking of who has done the best contribution in this field. I mean, that's an obvious question to ask. But I also would like to emphasize that contributions in astronomy and space science can come from little unrecognized contributions, but actually taken together, you build something great. So, you might be working on a simple electronic or a circuit. So you will not have your name known, but this satellite will not work for not your contribution, or you will not be able to send human in space for not doing that contribution. So I think in the field of space science, it's not about the greatest contribution, but of course we want that, but it's doing your part, no matter how small it is, and doing it at the best of your ability, which will make our field or the space science field really prosper. And that's true for the Philippines. So I hope, Angelica, in the future, you keep that in mind. So there are many ways to contribute.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
po.
Thank you very much for that question, and thank you, Dr. Perez, for that answer. It seems that a lot of our online participants are named Angel, Angelica. Nalilito na rin ako actually. We have another one from Angeline Moran. I hope that I haven't, baka nalito ako. Miss Angeline Moran. Let me just pull up, oops, I lost it.
Hello po.
There she is. Okay, go ahead, Angeline.
Hello po. Good day. My question lang po is, do we need a doctoral degree to become an astronaut? That's it lang po.
Thank you, Angeline. Do we need a doctoral degree to become an astronaut? Sobra ka na, Dr. Maricor. Masyado kang ano, give chance to others. Engineer Bond, do you think that you need a doctoral degree in order to become an astronaut?
I was trying to see if I could look it up quickly, but so I can't remember if every astronaut needs to have a PhD, but I can tell you that there are so many applicants to become an astronaut that if you had a PhD, you have a better chance of actually getting in. We have thousands of people trying to apply for a handful of jobs every time they're advertised. And so you're really trying to compete with the best and the brightest. And then if you look in the NASA website, so I don't know it handy, but there are very specific requirements for astronauts. And it also matters whether you're trying to become a pilot, a commander, a mission specialist, or, depending on what role you want to fill. Obviously, if you wanted to be a commander and a pilot, you need to have flight hours. Usually, we get those people from the military because it's almost impossible to get the number of flight hours just being a hobby pilot, So, being in the military isn't a requirement, but that's like one step to get your flight hours. And then the PhD, it just makes you more competitive.
Understood, Engineer Bond. Okay, Dr. Soriano, you wanted to reply to that as well? Go ahead.
If you want to be an astronaut as a career, yes, it helps. But if you are entering as a space tourist, in the future, who knows, space tourism would be very, very commonplace. Then it may not you may not need a PhD for that, but you just need to learn how to survive the travel to orbit and to live in space, to learn how to live in space. Get training for that. Okay. If you
Right, you can be a space tourist.
A space tourist.
Thank you.
If you become a space.
May I add something to that?
Engineer Bal and Dr. Marcon.
Yes, Dr. Sobrichea, you also wanted to add something. Go ahead.
Please take your PhD because we need a PhD degree if you have to teach in the university. Para marami ang magtuturo, konti rin ang teacher. Pero kung gusto nyo sa tourism, edi wag na lang muna kayong mag-PhD. Hindi kayo pwedeng magturo sa university kung wala kayong PhD. I encourage you to go into the STEM sciences.
And Angeline, I posted on the Q&A the link to the astronaut requirements. And this is for NASA astronauts, by the way. So you can look in the different agencies, they'll have different requirements.
Okay, understood. Thank you. There are actually a question similar to that. We received a question from an 11-year-old, one of our participants, yes, is an 11-year-old, and she did ask whether she can become an astronaut. And I think the clear answer to that is yes, anyone can become an astronaut. there are certain requirements, obviously, because it's a job. Just like with any job, there are certain requirements. So all you have to do is fulfill those requirements, and definitely you can become an astronaut. There was also one actually very gender specific question. I forget now where it is, but the question was, can you give birth in space? Or I think because it's an issue that came up earlier about women having to pause or having to put on hold their careers or further studies because they have to rear a family if that is their choice. And therefore, I guess the question probably came up that can you give birth in space, or for that matter, because there are certain bodily functions that are specific to females. Do you get your period in space?
Gosh, I'll try this one.
Go ahead.
I'm sure they have run studies on this, but I just haven't looked into it myself. But definitely, I mean, we've had female astronauts who have been there for 6 months at a time. So, you know, they're able to document what happened to their period and, you know, whether it had any differences. I, you know, having a child in space, I couldn't tell you whether it is possible or not possible, but I can assure you that there's issues involved in rearing a baby in space, you know, living without that gravity. And, you know, that's going to play a big part in the strength of the bones and just a lot of things that have not been studied yet. And it's hard enough to plan for space flight for fully mature adults, you know, to make a trip to Mars, let's say, you know, anywhere from 6 to 9 months, and what that does to your body, your eyesight, your bone density, you know, all these different things. And, you know, adding to that equation, you know, having a child whose body isn't fully mature and formed yet, you know, I'm sure there's a lot of biological issues attached to that. So it'll be a while before we can really quantify what and qualify what those are.
That means that requires further study, and that is another aspect for medical, you know, for the medical field, not specifically engineering, but medical for the medical field. And I hope that the one who asked that question can consider that. And I know we're running out of time, but maybe you can squeeze in one more. Consul Ferdy Flores, who will be joining us from Agana. Good morning, good evening. Ano na ba dyan sa inyo? Ferdy Flores, are you online?
Good afternoon from Guam. I was a former student of Professor Sobrechea, so hello, ma'am. I hope you still remember me. I was the only guy in your all-female gender sensitivity class, I think. Ma'am, I have a question. My question is, are there still gender-based hindrances in space science careers? Science being a gender-neutral profession, in my opinion, or the disparity in women representation in space science careers may be explained fully or largely by the fact that there is low interest among women to pursue careers in sciences and therefore low representation in that career. Thank you.
Yes, as I mentioned a while ago, the engineering sciences, mechanical engineering, math is heavily male dominated. Well, ang sinasabi naman natin at the end of the day is it's a choice. In terms of laws on gender equality, there is no bias. We are telling them men and women enter the field. But at the end of the day, there is gender equity, the principle of you give more to those who need more, who will survive the area. Hindi tayo magdadala naman ng babae dyan kung mamamatay siya, malalason siya. Alam mo ang problema kasi sa space engineering, chemicals din eh. May study kaming ginawa rin noon, yung impact on mga maternal at saka roles. So my former student, what I'm trying to say is that in terms of gender equality, there are no more barriers. Men and women can enter, but it's a woman's choice. At the end of the day, self-empowerment. You have to decide whether kaya mo o hindi. nag-STEM tayo, maraming pumasok sa STEM, pero tingnan mo yung mga nasa STEM, nasa kwarto lahat ang mga babae, yung nasa field lalaki. So na-stereotype din, nasa mga kwarto nila. So I think there are real barriers pa rin, unless we change our culture, unless we provide the enabling environment really for women. But at the end of the day, it's self-empowerment and it's a woman's choice.
Yeah, self-empowerment naman talaga.
O, pasado ka na? Pasado na ako, sir.
Ma'am, self-empowerment is the crucial idea there, ma'am. And I'm happy to hear it from you.
Thank you very much, Consul Freddy. There's another one in the Q&A. I'm trying to look for it. She is into business and management. Is there a career path for her in the space sector, being in the field right now of business and management? Would like to answer that? Dr. Soriano, go ahead.
Sorry if I'm hugging the answers. I'm hugging the answers. Just because of the experience from the Stamina for Space program, might I add that one of the objectives of the program is to really get a space industry going by collaborating with local companies, okay, to have them help in building the satellites and the payloads, okay. So if you're a business major or you're business oriented, there are many things that need business sense in the future aspects of the Philippine Space Agency. For example, collaborating with industry. We learned that sometimes when a satellite project is being done, you have to get industry to ride on. Meaning you don't hire them, you make them pay for the chance to create a component of the satellite or the payload. So that's what's being done elsewhere. You get collaborators from industry, private-public partnership nga. So if you have a business major, you can explain to them what is the return of investments if you invest in a project for space. That's one. Okay, so that's the upstream side, the hardware side. No? How about the downstream side? Dr. Gay Jane Perez would know more about this because, for example, you have all these data and all of them are actually very valuable for different businesses. For example, fishing fleet would need an image of where the fish would be. For example, they would need to know where is the eddies of chlorophyll in Philippine seas. Because if you have plankton there, so if there's a lot of chlorophyll in a part of a sea in the Philippines, that means there's a lot of plankton there. And if there's plankton there, there would be small fish. And if there are small fish, the big fish will be there, having a feeding frenzy. And the fishing fleet would need where to know this information. That's why they buy satellite imagery to know where to fish. So we need a business manager to manage how to sell or how to how do you call that, price these remote sense data, already these processed data to private agencies or private industries.
Spectacular, short and sweet. Definitely, it seems that space science has there is a role for everyone to play in whatever field you are in right now. There's a role for you to play in space science. It has been a very interesting discussion. We have actually overshot our 2.5 hour mark, but it just goes to show how interesting and how engaging the conversation is. So before I end, can I give our four panelists just a few minutes, perhaps a 1-minute spiel, parang elevator pitch, to our audience and to who comprise the entire Philippine spectrum, from the legislature to the media to students and to government agencies. Go ahead and do your spiel. We'll start with Dr. Soriano.
Okay. I look forward to the day when we no longer will need to celebrate a Women's Day, because then we'll all be equal. So let's work together as men and women to make this a reality.
Dr. Perez?
Yeah, so I would like to part with a quote. I'll share a quote from the late Ruth Bader Ginsburg. She says, "Women belong in all places where decisions are being made. It shouldn't be that women are the exception." End quote. So, from designing a concept, experiment, from end to end, women's input are valuable and should be valued. So, let us continue to challenge the gender barriers so that one day, just like Ma'am G said, we need not be the exception anymore, and we will not be celebrating Women's Month anymore. It must be our goal to make and establish our space as women in the field of science and technology, and even better if beyond that.
Dr. Sobrichea, your turn.
Yes, I'm so impressed with all your presentation as your Lola, as your grandmother. I really would like all of us to continue with what we are doing. I thought after half a century of advocating for gender equality, we are in a better position now. I'm very sad that we have a fundamentalist backlash internationally. If you read all the reports going on across different countries, especially in the country, I encourage you, my young sisters, to continue. Bibigyan ko kayo ng ang bininigalo ko yung fish balls. Papadalhan ko kayo ng fish balls sa mga kwarto nyo kapag kayo ay nagtatrabaho ng maayos. Maraming salamat po.
Looking forward to those fish balls, Dr. Sobrichea, and finally, Engineer Josephine Santiago Bond.
Dr. Sorbichea, when I go to the Philippines, I'm going to look for you and get my fish balls. So I just want to encourage the folks that are on the line, especially the younger ones trying to get into STEM careers. You know, you really add value to a group that you're entering into by being true to yourself. You know, part of it is, you know, you need to be self-aware to be able to do that. You need to seek feedback, decide what it is that you want to do, identify areas that you can make a change. Because blending in and striving to be just like others isn't really adding value, you know, and it kind of stunts creativity, it stunts innovation, and it doesn't help everyone. So your value is in bringing the diversity in the group. And I was worrying that we were leaving out some folks that aren't exactly in STEM, but want to get into the space sciences. And so, you know, I can tell you that in NASA, there's room for everyone. And I can tell you that Philippine Space Agency probably is the same way, you know, from having business majors to lawyers and doctors, like medical doctors, to engineers and, you know, and scientists, communicators. We have public affairs. Their job is so important because we couldn't really effectively get the attention of the rest of the world by just leaving it to the engineers and scientists. But yeah, make an informed decision. If you want to get into STEM, don't let it scare you. You know, give it a try. I gotta say, give it a try at least. Determine if it's for you. I'm not gonna say it's for everyone. It really isn't for everyone, but you have to get to that conclusion yourself. Don't let anyone tell you that you can't do it. Don't be afraid and not even try, you know, and make that informed decision for yourself.
Thank you very much, Engineer Joe, and thank you to all our panelists. Indeed, your words have been inspiring. And true, there is enough space for everyone and Juana in space. And before we end, I would like to call on the head of the Carlos P. Romulo School of Diplomacy of the Foreign Service Institute, Dr. Marichu Liwanag, to give her closing remarks. Dr. Choi.
Thank you, Ms. Sarne. I would like foremost to express our appreciation to Engineer Bond, to Dr. Soriano, to Dr. Perez, and most especially to Dr. Sobrichea, who is one of our champions and pioneer advocates in the field of gender and development, and one of the team who prepared the Magna Carta of Women for the Philippines, and also the preparation of the Convention on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women in the international arena. Okay. On behalf of the FSI Director General, Jose Maria Carino, good day once again. The Foreign Service Institute is very pleased with this Women's Month 2021 celebration and collaboration with the trailblazers and government, the academe, civil society, and private sector to advance the women in space agenda. We appreciate all the hard work of the Department of Foreign Affairs, particularly the Office of United Nations and international organizations, the Department of Science and Technology, the Philippine Space Agency, the Commission on Higher Education, and the Department of Education to make sure that we execute a timely and relevant response to the call of the United Nations campaign to make space for women. To close this year's celebration of women's indomitable and adventurous spirit and their noteworthy contribution in space science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, or STEM, I would like to share 3 reflection points before we leave this virtual space. When I think of space, I think of the stars. What we just did today can be likened to a spark, a synergy for science diplomacy. I believe this convergence of energy and effort is a necessary strategy. No individual or organization can do this alone. We lift each other up and we push things forward and help out with what we can give. This is a great start. The well-prepared presentations, the vibrant discussions, and the connections made, we really do hope that all of this would spark more interest to support girls and women to pursue careers in STEM or STEAM, that includes the arts, and advanced space science in the Philippines. When I think of space, I think of its vastness. Its vastness reminds me that there is indeed a space for everyone. Men, women, LGBTQI+. We all have a place, and the space is big and can be welcoming. We can observe diversity and inclusion as guiding principles in how nature works, in ecosystems, in the solar system. There are hundreds of things working like clockwork, like a symphony. Each one of us here got something from this event, a thought that fortified further our beliefs, or maybe an insight that will help carry out what we are setting ourselves to do now. Men supporting women in their career, may it be their wives or women colleagues, role models continuing to inspire young girls, advocates echoing the message to different venues, policymakers reflecting on the status quo, challenging it, and cause positive change. Come to think of it, all of us can do a little something to fill up the void and accept the challenge that there is room for improvement to make women thrive in STEM and space science. Pwedeng punuan ang wala o pagbutihin pa kung ano ang meron tayo. When I think of space, I think of women and girls in their rightful place. And where is this rightful place? The place and space is here and now. My dear young people, I encourage you to take a space. You are the future and also the now. You have a right to take up space and you have a responsibility to do so. You have a right to be here and be yourselves and the very best version of yourself. You just have to find your purpose and live your life with clear intentions. To all the women and girls in this room, we appreciate your presence in this space. You can maximize your options in the scheme of things. You make better the workplaces, the schools, homes, and even our relationships. So to move this agenda forward, we must take our respective space and responsibility. When we do this, we dare to make steps, and even if they are small, it can create positive changes, keeping hope alive, creating a ripple effect, and finding things. And if we find things difficult or exhausting in the future, we can rest a bit and try again. The Foreign Service Institute remains true to its commitment as a formidable partner in this endeavor. We will continue to contribute in whatever way we can do to build on what sparked our interest today. This event has also enriched us. May our experience keep us fired to focus on and make space for women in little and big ways from wherever we are and whichever role we take. Until our next meeting and exchanges, may the stars guide us. May this experience make us braver. Thank you very much for this partnership and enjoy your journey. Thank you, participants, and good day.
Very well said, Dr. Marichu. Thank you very much for your message, and she has summed up everything that we have discussed. There is space for everyone. There is space for women. We need to continue making space for women in order that they can fill the space necessary to reach our goal of reaching the stars. So just a few more reminders for our participants. We will be giving you an e-certificate as soon as you have fulfilled or filled up the evaluation form. The link to the evaluation form has been shared with you. And in addition to that e-certificate, we will also be giving you the presentation of Mr. Marcus Wolfram from UNOSA, the one that you heard from earlier. And so e-certificates will be sent to you. And of course, do note that for those who are joining us from the NCR bubble, that includes the Metro Manila, Bulacan, Laguna, Cavite, and Rizal, do know that we are on ECQ, and therefore you are encouraged not to go out unless it is for emergency for emergency or for very specific purposes. Everyone is reminded of the need for space, the need for physical distancing, and of course, apat dapat. Remember, air circulation is important, physical distancing is important. Always wear a mask and a face shield if you do have one. And you're supposed to have only 30 minutes of interaction with or without a mask. Okay, apat dapat. And of course, don't forget to always wash your hands. So, thank you, Engineer Bond, Dr. Perez, Dr. Soriano, and Dr. Sobrichea, and to all our audience who have been with us this 3 hour and 49-minute webinar. Thank you very much. This is Emma Sarnes signing off.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much to everyone, to our esteemed panel of speakers. Maraming salamat po, Dr. Sobrichea, Dr. Perez, Dr. Soriano, and si Engineer Bond, and of course, Director Emma Sarne. Thank you for being a fantastic moderator. Thank you for our team, Yunio, Ched, Philsa,